Chapter 124, The Pack Bond PT1. Leah POV. The world tilted sideways. My father lay crumpled on the floor, my mother screaming his name, and beside me, my little brother, my baby brother, was no longer human. Seth's fur bristled in every direction, his long, awkward legs shaking under him. His breath came in sharp, panicked pants, his eyes huge and glassy. He stumbled into the table, claws gouging the wood, then jerked away like he didn't recognize his own body. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a low rumble from my chest. My thoughts tangled, half words, half instinct, a blur of protect, protect, protect beating against my skull. The scent of fear was everywhere, Seth's, Mom's, my own, drowning me in it. Mom didn't even look at me anymore. She was on the floor, hands on Dad's chest, crying his name over and over as she started chest compressions. My claws flexed uselessly against the floor. I didn't know where to go, what to do, or what I was. Seth gave a broken, keening whine. His legs folded, his whole body shrinking down, but he couldn't seem to reverse the change. He looked at me, no, through me, begging silently for something I didn't know how to give. And then, a jolt of something not my own slammed into my mind. A voice. Not heard but felt. What the hell? Far off, through the fog of panic, other minds stirred. Stronger, steadier. Not human voices, not exactly, but wolves. Third person switched to the pack. On the ridges above La Push, 3 wolves loped through the trees, their paws silent on the forest floor. Jacob, Paul, and Jared were halfway through a training circuit, their minds brushing against one another in the easy rhythm of the pack. They were all riding Jacob's high that Bella knew about the wolf shift now and still accepted him. His plan still had a chance. He still had a chance with her. The pack mind was a little confusing, and you had to keep a good sense of self to stop the other's emotions from bleeding into yours. And then the pulse hit them, a surge of raw power, wild and clumsy, tearing across the bond. Jacob skidded to a halt, claws carving furrows into the earth. His ears flattened, hackles rising. Did you feel that? Paul snarled low, the sound vibrating through the link. Someone phased. Someone new. But no one we have been watching has shown any signs of it yet. Jared's tail lashed. 2. I swear I felt 2. Paul looked around. What the hell? The 3 of them stilled, listening. The forest seemed to hum with the echo, like the air itself had shifted. Then a voice cut through the link, raw, panicked, overlaid with a wolf's cry for help. Perhaps most surprisingly, it was a female voice. Wah, what is happening? Seth, look at me, are you okay? A second voice joined, younger, frantic. Lee. Dad, what's happening? Jacob's gut clenched. Leah. Seth. His eyes narrowed, gaze turning toward the Clearwater house in the distance. Without another word, all 3 wolves launched into a dead sprint, the forest tearing past as they raced toward the source. Leah, this is Jared. Jared Cameron. Are you okay? Is something attacking you? Leah's answer came broken, terrified. Jared. I'm a monster. I got mad, and then suddenly I was no longer me. My dad, he saw me and fell down. My mom is trying to help him. But Seth is here too. And he changed like me. What is going on? How are we talking? Jared's mental voice was steady but urgent. Listen carefully, Leah, you too, Seth. There is nothing wrong with you. You are in control, this is a blessing of our blood. You now belong to the pack, and we can communicate with our minds when we are shifted. Right now, it's me, Paul Lote, and Jacob Black. Jacob broke into the conversation at that point. Leah, we are right outside. Jared and Paul will change back to normal and help your mother. Once they are there, you and Seth need to come outside with me so we can get into the woods and help Kin come for your dad." Seconds later, two boys, well men, rushed into the house through the front door. Leah recognized them both as people who hang around with Sam a lot lately. She approached and let out a questioning whine, the sound instinctive. "Is he going to be okay?" Seth moved awkwardly over, also trying to edge closer to their father. Jacob's voice was calm but firm across the link. "If you are trying to ask Jared or Paul, they can't hear you right now. Please come out so they can get help, and you aren't seen." Seth let out an angry mental shout. "What does it matter if we are seen? Get him some help." Jacob forced a calming tone into his reply, pushing reassurance down the link. "If someone sees you, it'll cause questions and delays. That would slow help reaching your father. Come out so we can get into the woods. Don't worry, either Jared or Paul will stay with your mother the whole time. She's a nurse, everything that can be done is being done." Both Leah and Seth were hesitating, the whole situation was overwhelming, and fear for their father made them hesitate even more. Jacob's voice pushed firm and steady across the link. "Leah, Seth now. Out of the house. Trust me." Seth whimpered low in his throat, torn between instinct and fear. "I don't want to leave Dad." "You're not leaving him," Jacob cut in, calm but commanding. "Jared and Paul are with your mom. They'll handle it. The fastest way you can help your dad is to get out of sight before someone else shows up." Inside, Jared crouched by the couch, eyes flicking between Sue and Harry as Sue continued with the chest compressions. His voice was tight but practical. "I'll call for an ambulance." Harry's body jolted faintly under the force of each compression, Sue's rhythm practiced and unrelenting. Her jaw was clenched, her eyes locked on her husband's face with a mix of terror and discipline only a nurse could hold. Leah's ears flattened at the sight, a whine rising in her throat, but Jacob's command cut through her panic. "Leah! Seth! Out! Now!" Paul moved through the house to the back door, pushing it open for Leah and Seth. "Go, quickly! You need to get under control so you can be with your mother." Leah's paws moved before she realized it, claws scraping the linoleum as she bolted for the back door. Seth stumbled after her, nearly tripping over his own legs before his body learned how to move in this new shape. Jacob's dark form was waiting at the tree line, dark brown eyes locking on them. He dipped his head once and turned, his massive body flowing into the forest. "Stay close. Don't think, just run. Let instinct guide you." Leah didn't hesitate this time. She tore after him, Seth at her heels, the thud of their paws fading into the woods as the pack bond hummed with their raw, unsteady thoughts. Behind them, the wail of sirens rose in the distance. Leah's chest clenched tighter with every stride, the sound chasing her into the woods. Guilt gnawed at her, whispering that this was her fault, all of it. And still, even knowing that, her paws carried her farther away, running when her father needed her most. The forest blurred around her. Branches clawed at her fur, mud kicked up under her paws. She didn't know where she was going, only that Jacob's massive form kept ahead of her, steady and sure, and Seth was behind her, clumsy but determined. And then a new presence slammed into her mind. Not Jacob, not Paul, not Jared. Something heavier. Older. Command wrapped in raw instinct. "What is happening?" The voice was steel, familiar yet altered, carrying the weight of a leader. "Sam." Leah's paws faltered mid-stride. Seth stumbled into her flank with a yelp, but she hardly noticed. The pack mind thrummed with Sam's presence, and suddenly her thoughts weren't her own anymore, they brushed against his, and he could see her panic, her shame, her guilt. "Leah? Seth?" His tone sharpened, cutting through the chaos. "Both of you calm down. Breathe. You need to steady yourselves before you lose control completely." Leah's hackles rose without her meaning to, her chest heaving. "Get out of my head." The snarl ripped through the bond, her fear tangling with anger. Sam's reply was quiet, but it carried a force that brooked no argument. This is the pack. You're in it now, whether you like it or not. And that means I will be in your head. If you fight it, you'll only make it worse. Jacob interjected, his presence a buffer between them. Sam easy. They just phased. Seth's barely standing on 4 legs, and Leah's blaming herself. There was a long silence, heavy and suffocating, before Sam's thoughts came again. Softer this time. We'll sort it out. But not here. Not like this. Keep them moving, Jacob. I'm on my way. Leah swallowed hard, though in this form it was more a rasp of breath. She didn't know what terrified her more, losing her father, or the thought of Sam seeing every raw, broken piece of her inside this bond she couldn't shut out. Chapter 125, The Pack Bond PT2. Leah POV. The forest blurred around me, paws hammering the half-frozen ground, but no matter how far or fast I ran, I couldn't escape the voices. They weren't mine, but they pressed in close, bleeding across the edges of my thoughts until I couldn't tell where I ended, and they began. Seth's fear. Jacob's steady commands. Paul's impatience. And now him. Sam. The sound of his voice in my head nearly sent me sprawling. Deep, calm, too familiar. For years, that voice had been mine alone. Now it was everywhere, laced through my thoughts like it had always belonged. Leah. That was all. Just my name. But for me, it carried all the weight of every memory, every promise, every kiss he'd given me before he tore it all away and gave it to Emily. I snarled through the bond, fur bristling. Stay out of my head. But there was no getting out. There was no out at all. The bond didn't care about what I wanted. It didn't care that I'd rather tear myself apart than let Sam hear the jagged mess of my thoughts. He was there. They were all there. And then it hit me, like ice water dumped over fire. I read it from their thoughts. This was forever. There was no shutting them out. No privacy. Every angry thought, every secret shame, every fleeting memory wide open. To a pack of men who already saw me as trouble. And worse, my little brother. My chest heaved, breath tearing in ragged bursts. The humiliation burned hotter than the change itself. Seth's voice tumbled clumsily into the link, shaky and high-pitched with fear. Leah? I don't get it. What's happening to us? My stomach twisted. He was hearing me. Everything. God. No sister wants her little brother inside her head. No woman wants these men rifling through the pieces of her she never meant to share. My memories of Sam's mouth on my skin, of the nights I'd cried into my pillow, of the day Emily smiled and everything shattered, any of them could see it. Seth could see it. A growl built in my throat, half rage, half despair. This can't be happening. When Sam's reply came, it was steady but heavy with something unsaid. Leah. I never wanted this for you. I know what you're feeling. I know it hurts. Don't, I snapped, sharper than claws. Don't talk to me like you know. You don't. You. My thoughts stuttered when his memories hit me. Emily's face, soft and smiling, the tug in his chest when he thought of her. Love. Devotion. The kind of certainty he'd once promised me. Then, for just one fraction of a second, Sam compared me to Emily, wondered if she would react this way in my position. Wondered if she would handle it better. My body stumbled, paws skidding in the mud. My chest burned worse than the fire under my skin. I collapsed, curling into myself. My mind went blank, every thought shut down under the weight of it. Seth whined, confused and scared, his thoughts tumbling. Leah? What's wrong? I could feel Seth nudge me with his muzzle, but it didn't register. I was aware, but unable to process or react. Seth paced around me, whining. Jacob moved closer, maybe to see if I was hurt, but Seth let out a growl at his approach, his hackles up. Jacob moved back, giving Seth and me a comfortable space. And then, moments later, a large black wolf stepped from the evening shadows as if the darkness had carried him there. The weight of his presence pressed down on us like a storm. Sam. The Alpha arrived. Even through the haze of panic, I felt Seth's instinct shift, his body wanting to roll over, to show his belly to the Alpha's overwhelming dominance. But despite that, Seth planted himself between me and the black wolf, his teeth bared, trembling but unyielding. One thought, raw and unpolished, thundered through him, so loud it almost drowned everything else out: protect my sister. A puppy's desperation, trying to protect his family. Sam's dark eyes locked on Seth, unreadable in the wolf's heavy gaze. The command wasn't spoken aloud, but it thrummed across the bond, quiet but absolute. Stand down. Seth shook, every muscle quivering, claws digging into the frozen ground. His growl wavered, the sound caught between terror and determination. No. She's my sister. You don't touch her. The bond vibrated with his desperation, and it hit me. My mind started to move again. I'd always thought of Seth as my kid brother, the one I had to shield from the world. But here he was, baring his teeth at the Alpha himself, his mind roaring with thoughts of the only thing he could cling to, me. My chest constricted, a sob caught somewhere inside my wolf's throat. He was just a boy. My brother. And he was going to tear himself apart trying to protect me from the one person in this pack who could crush him without a second thought. Sam's presence pressed heavier, a weight impossible to resist. His command deepened, his authority saturating the air until even I felt the pull of it in my bones. Seth. Enough. You are pack. You are safe. So is Leah. Stand down. Seth whimpered, his growl crumbling into a pitiful sound of fear and confusion. His body shook, torn between his protective instinct and obedience, between being a boy who wanted to fight for his sister and the wolf that couldn't resist the Alpha's command. Jacob's thoughts intruded, his disappointment at Sam for using the Alpha command so readily. Sam growled and snapped at Jacob's thoughts, but didn't address them. I forced my head up, my own voice bleeding raw into the bond. Seth. Stop. Please. It's okay. The words cracked through him, cutting sharper than Sam's dominance. His tail tucked low, his body sagging in reluctant surrender. His thoughts dimmed to a broken whimper, Leah. I can't. I don't. My brother's panic bled into my veins, Sam's steady control tangled with my own thoughts. I couldn't tell where Leah ended and the rest of them began. And beneath it all, like a second heartbeat, the humiliation burned. They could all see this: my fear, my shame, my memories of Sam, of Emily. My little brother could see it. Feel it. I wanted to tear my own mind out just to keep him from seeing me like that. Sam took a step closer, his massive paws soundless. His voice slid across the bond again, low and certain. Leah, breathe. You're not alone. You're safe. Safe. The word rattled around in my head like a cruel joke. There was no safe. Not anymore. Not with my mind lying open like a wound for them all to pick through. Seth's trembling form pressed against my curled-up body, a hot, shaking anchor. Leah. I'm scared. That did it. That cracked through all the noise. My baby brother, caught up in this nightmare, clinging to me for stability I didn't have. It was supposed to be me protecting him, being there for him. I uncurled from the ball I had been in, stood up and approached Seth, then lowered my head, pressing my muzzle against his, a shuddering whine rising in my throat. It's okay. I've got you. For the first time since the change, the fire inside me flickered not out, but steadier. I still felt Sam's presence, still felt Jacob's quiet watchfulness, but Seth's terror began to ease under my touch. His body slumped against mine, exhausted. Somewhere, under all the noise and shame, the realization rooted itself in me like ice: this is my life now. This bond. This exposure. This pack. No more walls. No more privacy. I thought that losing Sam to Emily had broken me. This was worse. This was being stripped open. Flayed. Every jagged thought, every memory, every ugly piece of me out in the open for men I could barely tolerate, and my little brother, to trip over. The thought was enough to make me want to scream. But Seth was still pressed against me, trembling. So instead, I swallowed it down. For him. For a few breaths, that was all there was, his heartbeat hammering against mine, the pack's voices dulled to a background hum. For a moment, I almost believed I could hold it together. And then Jared's voice slipped into the bond, halting and heavy. Leah. Seth. I'm sorry. Harry. Your dad. He didn't make it. The words weren't alone. His thoughts came with them, unbidden, unstoppable, the flashing red of ambulance lights, the sterile stench of antiseptic. My mother bent over Dad's body, her hands pounding rhythm into his chest long after the paramedics had shaken their heads. Her voice, hoarse and breaking, as she begged him to come back. We saw it all. Felt it through Jared. Seth let out a strangled cry that twisted into a whine, his grief crashing into me through the bond, raw and jagged. And I couldn't stop mine from joining it. There was no wall, no silence, no escape. And then the sound ripped free of both of us, unplanned, unrestrained, a howl that rose into the night, torn from the marrow of our bones. Long, broken, laced with everything we had lost. Jacob answered, his deep voice weaving with ours. Paul and Jared joined next, though we were miles apart, their grief carried on the wind. Even Sam, steady and strong, tipped his head back to the evening stars and let the sorrow rise from his chest. One pack. One loss. Our voices blended together into something bigger than words, a chorus of loss that rolled through the darkening forest, and lingered there, long after the howls had faded. Chapter 126, Strength in the Youngest. Sue Clearwater POV. The fluorescent lights of the hospital had always been harsh, but tonight they felt cruel. Every corner of the ER seemed to echo with the voice of the on-call doctor dashing the last of her hopes. She had worked on him with her own hands, had counted every compression, every second, had begged him to come back. But Harry Clearwater was gone. For a brief moment, she wondered if it would have been a different story had they gone to the Forks Hospital. Even though the Cullens had left, the tribe's unspoken rule of avoidance still dictated a longer drive to a more distant hospital. She shook herself. No, this was the hospital she worked at, she knew the doctors here and trusted them. Even if the Forks Hospital had newer and fancier equipment. Sue sat hunched in the hard plastic chair, the hospital blanket someone had placed on her, still hung around her shoulders. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling, bruised and swollen from the effort of trying to keep Harry here. She was a nurse, she knew when there was no coming back. She had felt it in her bones even as her palms pressed down on his chest. But her heart refused to let go, and now. A quiet shuffle of rubber wheels on linoleum drew her attention. Billy Black rolled up beside her in his wheelchair, his hand reaching out, warm and steady on her arm. His face was lined with grief but calm, the way only Billy could manage. Sue, he said gently, I'm so sorry. On her other side, Quill Atira Sr. leaned heavily on his cane. His eyes glistened as he lowered himself into a chair with a sigh. We've lost one of our best. The council will never be the same without Harry's voice. He paused, his throat working as he swallowed. But this isn't just the council's loss. It's yours. Leah's. Seth's. You will not carry this alone. The words cracked something inside her. Sue pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle the sob that tore loose, her shoulders shaking. She tried to pull away from the memory of the giant wolves in her house. Tried to blame it on a fevered dream. Billy's grip tightened just slightly, grounding her. "You don't have to go back tonight," he murmured. "You and the kids could stay with Jacob and me. Where are Leah and Seth anyway? They should be here with you." Sue's eyes darted away, fixing on the sterile tiles. They ran," she whispered, her voice raw. After it happened. After Harry fell. There were wolves, giant wolves in my kitchen, Billy. I thought I'd lost my mind. But then I saw their eyes." Her throat closed. She couldn't finish. She couldn't say aloud what her heart already knew. Billy and Quill exchanged a startled look, one she caught even through her haze of grief. Their surprise was evident even to her tear-swollen eyes. Billy was the first to recover, his voice low and careful. "Sue, what you saw wasn't madness. You weren't dreaming." Her breath caught, a chill racing down her spine. "Then what was it?" Her voice trembled, her fingers twisting in the thin hospital blanket. "Because I swear, Billy, I saw my children in those eyes. My children. Tell me I'm wrong." Quill exhaled slowly, his cane tapping once against the tile as though marking time. "No, you're not wrong." His gaze was heavy with things unsaid, secrets older than either of them. "But there are truths that only the elders know, that Harry knew." The words hit her harder than any doctor's verdict. Harry had known. He had carried this secret while she sat across from him every night at the dinner table, thinking their lives were ordinary, their children safe. Her voice broke, jagged with grief and betrayal. "So, he kept this quiet? From us? From me?" Billy's expression softened, his own grief weighing his shoulders. "Not to hurt you. To protect you. To protect them. We have never heard of a woman shifting in all our stories," and Seth, he shook his head slowly. "Seth should have been years away. We thought there was no need to worry yet." Quill's cane tapped once against the floor, his eyes clouded. "The next child we expected to shift was my grandson. That was what we were preparing for. Not this." Sue pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. A daughter stepping into something no woman had ever faced. A son dragged into it far too early. And Harry gone, leaving her to pick up the weight of secrets she had never been trusted to share. She stood and wiped the last of her tears away. Her face pulled into a mask of calm, she pulled her dignity around her like armor. "I need to get home. They shouldn't come home to an empty house." Billy's gaze softened, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to try. "I'll have someone drive you," Quill offered, levering himself up with his cane. Sue nodded, knowing it would be the fastest way. The ride home blurred past her, headlights streaking over the wet pavement, but Sue hardly noticed. Her mind circled the same points over and over: Harry's secrets, her children's eyes in those wolves, the hole in her chest where her husband had been. When the car stopped in her driveway, she thanked Quill Jr. in a quiet voice, not trusting herself with more. Inside, the house felt too still. The blanket Harry had used on the couch was still thrown over the armrest. His coffee mug sat abandoned on the end table next to his lazy boy. Sue touched it once, then drew back as if it burned. Her eyes swept the room, not really searching for what she feared but bracing for it all the same. And then, faintly, from beyond the back door, she heard it, heavy paws in the yard, the low shuffle of bodies too large to be anything else. Her children were home. Leah POV. The forest was quiet around us, the echo of the grief-filled howls finally gone. But inside the pack bond, it was loud, overwhelming. My thoughts churned like a storm, bleeding out whether I wanted them to or not. "We should go home," Seth said, his voice still thin with shock but steadier than before. "Mom will be there, alone. She needs us." The word "us" sank like a stone in my gut. I faltered, my head hung low. "Not me," I muttered. The bond carried every crack of my doubt, every jagged edge of my shame. She won't want me. Seth's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide, glowing faintly in the dark. What are you talking about? Of course she does. But I couldn't stop the spiral. The image of Mom on the kitchen floor slammed into me, the look in her eyes when I shifted, the fear that had frozen her before she'd even screamed Dad's name. I'm the reason Dad's gone, I whispered into the bond. I lost control, and he saw me, and it killed him. The silence from the others pressed in Jacob's heavy sympathy, Paul's restless impatience, even Sam's quiet weight telling me he disagreed but wasn't going to argue it now. They all heard it. Every word. Every thought I didn't want to give voice to. Seth growled, sharp and desperate, vibrating across the link. Stop saying that. It wasn't you, Leah. Dad was sick, you know he was. It could have happened any time. But it happened because of me, I snapped back, my head fell, not wanting to look into Seth's eyes. Mom saw me for what I am. A monster in her kitchen. Do you really think she wants me walking back through that door? Seth's thoughts tumbled fast, clumsy but fierce. She's our mom. She doesn't care what you look like, she cares that you're her daughter. She cares that I'm her son. She needs us. Both of us. I turned away from him, my body trembling. You don't get it. I can't face her. Not like this. Besides, you heard her earlier. I'm broken, dragging the family through the mud. His presence blazed across the bond, young but unyielding. Most of that was said by you, not her. The words hit me like claws in the chest. Seth. We have to, Leah. She needs us. His thoughts burned with a clarity I hadn't felt from him since this started. She can't be alone. Not after losing Dad. She needs someone there, and if you won't go, then I will. Alone if I have to. The pack bond rippled with the certainty in him. Jacob's quiet approval. Sam's grim acceptance. Even Paul's restless energy stilled for a breath. I hung my head again, shame and love warring inside me. Okay, I breathed into the link. I'll try. Let's go. Chapter 127, 2 views, 1 starry sky. Leah POV. The run back to our house was thick with silence, not from the world around us but in the bond itself. Grief weighed on every thought. No jokes from Jared. No sharp edges from Paul. Not even Jacob's usual steady reassurance could soften what waited for us at the end of the trees. By the time we broke the tree line, Jared had rejoined us, the last member of the pack so far, pacing alongside him. I circled back and grabbed Embry, thought he should be here for the pack. Jared supplied. Embry call, the pack mind informed her. There was also something else surrounding everyone's thoughts about Embry, but I can't focus on that at the moment. 7 wolves, moving as one, slowed at the edge of the yard. The lights inside the house glowed faintly, warm against the dark. Through the window, I saw her. Mom. Standing in the kitchen, looking around like she had misplaced something. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, the weight of loss pulling her shoulders down. Seth whimpered low in his throat, his paws shifting nervously against the frozen grass. His thoughts flickered across the bond, hesitant but fierce. She's alone. She needs us. I froze where I was. The memory of her face in the kitchen slammed into me, the wide, horrified eyes as I shifted for the first time, the way she had gone pale before screaming Dad's name. The fear. The disbelief. Not me, I softly thought, my chest tight. She wouldn't want me. My gaze flicked toward Sam. No one does. I caught a flash of shame from Sam before he could bury it. Seth's head jerked toward me, his thoughts snapping sharp. Yes, she does. She's our mom. But before I could argue, before the shame could claw me raw again, the back door creaked open. Mom stepped out onto the porch. Her gaze swept across the yard, across the massive wolves staring back at her. For a long breath, the night held still. Then her eyes landed on Seth. "Baby." Her voice cracked, soft and breaking, but certain. "That's you, isn't it?" Seth froze, every line of his body trembling. Then he surged forward, paws pounding across the grass. He skidded to a stop a few feet from the steps she stood on, massive and shaking, his eyes locked on her face. For a moment I thought she'd flinch. That she'd recoil the way she had before. But she didn't. She stepped down from the porch steps and walked straight to Seth. Her hands reached out and sank into his fur, clutching at him like she might never let go. "My boy," she whispered, her tears soaking into his ruff. "My Seth." Seth whimpered, pressed his head against her chest, and then his body shuddered, reshaped, until he was kneeling there in his human skin, bare and shivering in his grief. She pulled him into her arms, no hesitation at all. Just a mother holding her son. The bond went quiet on his end. No more thoughts, no more voice. Just silence where Seth had been. The absence left a hole in me, sharp and unexpected. Mom's eyes lifted past him, searching the remaining group of wolves. They found me where I lingered at the edge of the yard, still wolf, still frozen in place. "Leah," she said, her voice breaking. "Please. Come here, sweetheart." The pack pressed at me, Jacob steady, Jared firm, even Sam's alpha presence nudging, but all I could feel was the memory of Dad's face when he fell, the fear in Mom's eyes, the guilt that wrapped tighter every time I breathed. "No," I whispered into the bond, stumbling back a step. "I can't. Not now." "Leah," Mom tried again, reaching out one hand even as she held Seth with the other. "Please." It was too much. Their voices, her eyes, the bond pressing in close. I wanted silence. I wanted distance. I wanted out. I bolted. Seth's voice shouted after me, faint now, only carried by the air, "Not the bond, Leah. Don't go." The pack surged, ready to follow, but Sam's command rolled across the link like thunder. "Stand down. Let her go. Everyone. Shift back." And then, softer, directed only at me, "Find your footing, Leah. We'll be here when you're ready. We will give you as much time as we can." The noise dimmed as, one by one, the others phased back, their presence vanishing the bond, from my head. Quiet. Blessed quiet. For the first time since this stated, my thoughts were mine alone. The forest tore past me in blurs of black trunks and silver moonlight, my paws eating the ground like I could outrun the weight in my chest. I didn't care where I was going, only away. Away from Mom's eyes, from Seth's pleas, from the bond pressing too close. I just wanted quiet. Branches whipped at my sides. Roots snatched at my paws. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, but I didn't stop until my body gave out. My paws skidded against stone, claws scraping rock. The exhaustion of the first shift and the long night finally catching up with me. I stood panting as I looked around. The clearing was familiar. The lone somewhat flat rock near the center told me where I was, Thomas's Rock. The clearing that Cullen girl told me he liked to come to. Somehow, blindly, my legs had brought me here. My body sagged against the stone, my sides heaving. The silence settled heavy and deep, broken only by the sound of my ragged breathing. For the first time since everything shattered, the pack's voices were gone, the bond was quiet. It was just me. I lowered my head against the cold stone, the heat in my chest dimming to embers. I hated myself for it, but I cried deep, shaking sobs that tore out of my wolf's throat and vanished into the night. For Dad. For Mom. For Seth. For myself. And slowly, as the tears wrung me dry, the fire inside me shifted. Less rage, more ache. Less storm, more exhaustion. The change came without me forcing it. My body shuddered, bones folding, fur retreating, until I was left on the forest floor, naked and trembling, but at least I wasn't cold. Just naked, in the forest, alone. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around myself, trying to hide from the night. From everything. And then, a whisper of wind stirred the branches overhead. A soft rustle, unnatural in its direction, drew my gaze. There hanging in the trees, snagged where time and weather hadn't claimed it was a pack. Worn, weather-stained. I pushed myself up on unsteady legs and reached for it, heart thudding. Inside, folded neatly like someone had left them waiting, were clothes. Too big for me. But somehow familiar, somehow warm. Thomas's. I slipped the shirt over my head, the fabric hanging loose, the hem brushing my thighs. It smelled faintly of smoke and pine and something warm I couldn't name. I curled back against the stone, clutching the fabric close, and for the first time in years, I looked at the stars. Thomas POV. The stars in Nepal were sharp and endless, scattered like ice across the black sky. I lay back on the roof of my grandmother's hut, arms folded behind my head, letting the cold bite into my skin. The air up here always carried a bite, but tonight it felt sharper. For months I'd poured myself into training, into the struggle with my own blood, into trying to understand what I was becoming. The mountains had given me silence, the village had given me lessons, but neither had given me what I needed most. Not a place. People. Two, in particular. Bella's stubborn warmth. Edythe's quiet yearning, her need to belong. Both waiting oceans away while I clawed at fragments of control. I let out a long breath, watching it vanish in a pale cloud against the stars. It was almost time. My fire was steadier now. My forms obeyed me more often than not, even if the half-shift still drained me faster than it should. I wasn't finished, but I was close enough. Close enough to start heading home. The thought burned, not with fear, but with longing. A pull stronger than clan politics, stronger than mountain silence. Home wasn't here, it never had been. I'd known that when I arrived. But now I had the strength to leave, and I wouldn't look back. I sat up, the decision solid in my chest. Tomorrow, I'd start packing. Just the things I came with and the 3 books my grandmother had written. The tribe might want them. I'd say my goodbyes, even to the ones who didn't want to hear them. And then I'd leave. Take what I'd learned, and make the long road back to Forks. Back to where my heart waited. Now the only question was whether I stopped in Ithaca first, beat the piss out of Edward, and drag him back so Bella could make her choice, or whether I went straight to Forks and let her decide how to face him. I should probably ask Edythe what she thought first. With that decision made, I went inside to go to sleep. Chapter 128, The Mountain Remembers. The satellite phone hummed in my hand as I waited for Edythe to answer. I was excited to tell her I was finally coming home, the anticipation made every second seem like an hour. The battery icon blinked red in the corner of the screen. The solar plate had been packed away as it had proven useless the last week with the heavy cloud cover. I would have to keep this call short. The line connected and thoughts about battery life fell away. Thomas. Edythe's voice came through, thin with static, but steady. Morning, love. I hope my smile carried through my voice. You have never called me in the morning, is something wrong? I heard the worry in her voice. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, breaking loose like a held breath. I'm coming home. My first thought had been to tease her, but hearing her voice stripped that idea away. Besides, the battery wouldn't let me drag this out. Her inhale was sharp, almost a sob. You mean it? You're done there. I've learned what I needed. Enough to keep moving forward. It's time. My thumb brushed over the worn edge of the phone case, though my eyes were fixed on the pale dawn spilling over the ridges. The only question is, do I head straight to Forks, or to you in Ithaca?" There was silence on her end, broken only by the faint crackle of the signal. When she spoke, her voice was both yearning and restrained. "I want to tell you to come here. To me. But Bella, Charlie, they're in Forks. Edward's decision can't have been easy on them." I nodded to myself. "Then maybe I'll check flights in Kathmandu. See what makes sense. I'll call once I know." "Promise." "I promise." Her voice dropped to a whisper that the static almost swallowed. "Just, hurry." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the thin mountain air and the weight in my chest. For the first time in months, the way forward was clear. I slid the phone back into its carrying case, slung my pack over my shoulder, and walked out the door to a house I had no plans to return to. My feet carried me toward the training grounds where I knew Rohan would be. The yard was alive with the sounds of fists striking flesh and feet pounding into frost-hardened earth. Rohan stood at the far side, arms folded, his sharp gaze following every movement. He didn't shout, didn't pace, he didn't need to. His silence carried more weight than any barked order. He saw me the moment I stepped into the yard. A small flick of his fingers dismissed the sparring pairs, and the space fell quiet except for the sigh of wind through the flags strung above us. "You're early," Rohan said, his voice as steady as the mountain behind him. "I'm not here to train." My breath fogged in front of me. "I'm leaving." One of his brows rose, but his expression didn't falter. "Leaving? I've learned what I can hear. It's time to go home." For a moment, he simply studied me, his gaze dark and unblinking. The silence stretched, long enough that the weight of it pressed against my chest. "You think you are ready, you're tethered to the mountain strong enough," he said at last. I squared my shoulders. "I have come and done as we agreed back in Forks. I've trained, I've learned control. That's enough." Rohan's jaw tightened. "Control is not the same as balance. The fire you carry is not a tool, Thomas. It is a debt. Every ember must return to its flame, or it burns itself out." I frowned, not sure if he was warning me or reciting some old proverb. "I can manage it. I'll keep moving forward. Besides, you can't forget that my blood is not the same as those here. The Quileute survive away from the mountain." Rohan's eyes narrowed, a shadow flickering behind them. "The Quileute are cousins, yes, but not the same. Their fire is lesser, bound differently. Yours burns brighter. Wilder. That blood makes you more dangerous, not less." I lifted my chin. "Dangerous for who? I've kept it under control. You've seen it." He stepped closer, his voice low, carrying the weight of stone. "For now. But fire untended does not care for willpower. It devours. If, in the years ahead, you feel it dimming, if you feel yourself slipping into ash, you must return to the mountain. It is the only way to endure." I forced myself to meet his stare, though my chest tightened with something I didn't want to name. "I don't plan on coming back." For the first time since I'd known him, Rohan's composure cracked. Not anger, fear. He masked it quickly, turning his gaze toward the snow-dark peaks above. "The mountain remembers what is denied it," he murmured, more to the wind than to me. I hitched my pack higher on my shoulder and offered my hand, not wanting to leave at odds with someone who had done so much for me. Rohan looked down at my hand for a long moment. The muscles in his jaw worked as though he were weighing more than just a handshake. At last, he clasped it, his grip firm and warm, but brief. "You carry more than you know," he said quietly. "I hope the path you've chosen is wide enough to hold it." I gave a short nod, unsure what to say, and then let go. His hand lingered half a second longer, as if reluctant to release me, before he folded it back behind his back. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the yard. The prayer flags snapped in the wind above me, their colors blurred against the pale sky, and I kept my eyes on the trail that would lead me to the village center. The smell of wood smoke and boiling rice met me before I reached the lower terrace. Morning fires burned low in the stone hearths, their smoke curling into the pale air. Figures moved in and out of the haze, starting the day with the quiet rhythm of habit. I found Dorothy crouched beside one of the larger cooking fires, sleeves rolled up, turning flatbread on the hot stone with a wooden paddle. His face was ruddy with heat and effort, but the familiar grin broke out the instant he saw me. "Thomas!" He straightened, brushing ash from his hands. "You look like a man with a decision in his stomach. Come eat before you say it." I chuckled despite myself, taking the rough loaf he pressed into my hand. "I'm heading out today. It's time." His smile faltered, though he tried to hide it with a nod. "I thought as much. You've had that look lately, like your eyes were already on another horizon. Not that you were ever all that content here." "I owe you more than I can say," I told him. "Your patience, your food, your humor. You made this place bearable." Dorothy snorted, but his eyes shone. "Bah! I only fed you so you wouldn't waste away and shame us all. But if you ever wander back, my fire will be here, and my pot will be full. Maybe then I will finally beat you in the training grounds." We clasped forearms, his grip firm and steady, the kind that carried both farewell and promise. "Walk safe, Thomas Raizel," he said. "And wherever your fire takes you, don't let it burn you hollow." I nodded, swallowing hard, then turned toward the path leading to the gate. Behind me, the smoke curled upward, carrying the smell of bread and ash into the morning sky. Dorothy's final shouted words made my pace quicken just a bit. "You better make it through the gate before Who May finds out you are leaving." The path narrowed as I neared the village gate. A few early risers paused their work to watch me pass, not with hostility, but with that guarded curiosity they'd always shown me, as if they couldn't decide whether I belonged here or not. Maybe they were right. By the time I reached the gate, my uncle stood waiting. He leaned against the old timber post, arms folded, eyes fixed on me. He didn't speak, didn't raise a hand, just watched. The silence was heavier than words, but not cold. Judgment, maybe. Or acceptance. Or both. I inclined my head in respect. He gave the smallest nod in return. That was all. That was enough. I hitched my pack higher and stepped past him, boots crunching against the frost. Unseen by Thomas. From a shadowed alcove along the wall, Rohan watched. His hood was drawn, his presence hidden, though his eyes never left the figure as he moved beyond the gate. "You're letting him go." The words were spoken low, meant for no ears but his. Viagra stepped up beside him, the older man's face drawn, voice taut with concern. His gaze followed Thomas down the path. "Unbound fire, carried into the world. If the mountain is denied, what will that mean for him? For us?" Rohan's jaw worked, but his voice stayed quiet. "It is not for us to decide. The choice was always his." Viagra's hand tightened into a fist. "The choice may damn him. Or worse, damn us all." "The mountain remembers," Rohan said, echoing his earlier words. "It will have its due, one way or another. Maybe it's time to see if the mistakes from the past will not be made again. We are not rulers and should not be, but maybe he will find us a path. Guides maybe." They stood in silence, watching as Thomas walked the path away from the village. Chapter 129, Leaving Jiva's Home. Thomas POV. I kept my eyes on the narrow track ahead, the stone path twisting downward between terraces of rock and scrub. The morning air carried the sting of ice, and frost glittered in the cracks of the stones. For the first time since arriving, I felt like I was moving forward on my own terms. Each step past the gate was lighter, freer. The sound of hurried footsteps broke that illusion, echoing sharply against the rock. "Thomas!" Who May caught up to me just before the bend in the trail, her breath ragged from the run, her shawl slipping loose against the cold. You weren't going to say goodbye, she demanded, her voice sharp but trembling underneath. I adjusted the strap of my pack, steadying myself. Goodbyes only make leaving harder. I didn't want that for you. Her eyes blazed. Don't pretend this is mercy, Thomas. You're running not just from this village, but from me. I opened my mouth to tell her just how far off the mark she was, but she stepped closer, cutting me off. You think I don't see what you are? You're no fox, bound to one love for life. You carry the tiger's blood. Tigers don't belong to just one. Their females will share so long as the tiger chooses them fiercely enough. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because of how far she was willing to reach for them. I shook my head. Hume, you're a skilled fighter, and I respect you for that. But don't twist what we had. You were never mine, and I was never yours. Her face tightened, but she held her chin high. You think I don't know that? I wanted your strength in my clan's line, and yes, I would have taken more if you'd given it. But if not now, then at least keep me in mind for when you return. Time can change your view on leadership. I frowned, but she pressed on, her voice steadier, almost calm. The fire in you will fade. It always does. When you return to the mountain, I'll be here. And I'll be waiting. Her hand slipped from my arm, her shawl drawn tighter around her shoulders. She gave me one last searching look, then stepped back, watching as I turned back down the path. I adjusted the strap of my pack and kept moving, the crunch of stone underfoot carrying me farther from the village. Once again, unseen by Thomas. From their hidden vantage, the two elders watched Hume retreat slowly back toward the gate, her shawl clutched tight against the cold. Viakras shook his head, his voice low. The girl thinks she is clever, but she underestimates him. She chases his blood for her clan, yet she speaks of tigers without knowing what that truly means. A fox cannot think like a tiger. Rohan's gaze lingered on Thomas's figure as it shrank along the rocky path. Tigers do not bind themselves to one den, nor to one mate. Their strength is solitary, but when they choose with a fierceness no wolf or fox can match. Viakra's eyes narrowed. That fierceness may scatter bonds as much as it makes them. A tiger's heart is wide, but not gentle. Rohan's lips pressed thin. Perhaps. Or perhaps his heart will carve a path no one expects. The mountain remembers, yes, but it may yet remember him differently. I am intentionally keeping this departure vague and a little confusing so that I can come back one day if I want to expand on the clans. It feels unfinished to me because I couldn't make the story go where I wanted it to. But in all reality, it may not happen. Thomas POV. I adjusted the strap of my pack once more, then stopped. The weight on my shoulders felt wrong, too slow, too heavy. If I walked, it would take 3 days to reach Subrubasi. I didn't have 3 days to give. Well, I did, but I really didn't want to wait any longer than I had to get back to Edythe. With a steadying breath, I slipped the pack from my back and held it in my hands. The fire stirred inside me, eager. Quickly removing my clothes and tucking them in my bag, I reached for the fire in my mind. The change rolled through my body like a storm breaking. Bones stretched, muscles swelled, the world tilted as my senses exploded outward. In the space of a heartbeat, I dropped to 4 paws, the cold stone biting into the pads of my feet. The pack dangled awkwardly for a moment before I caught it firmly in my jaws. The straps tasted of sweat and leather, but it would hold. Then I ran. The narrow switchbacks and rocky terraces that slowed me in human form were nothing to the tiger. My body moved with a rhythm I hadn't earned, but claimed anyway, strength coiling through every stride, claws biting into stone, tail snapping for balance as I leapt from outcrop to outcrop. I didn't run full out but kept it at a steady trot. The type of pace that would eat the miles without exhausting me too quickly. The thin mountain air filled my lungs, but I never faltered. Where a man would stumble, the tiger surged. Hours blurred into the pounding of my heart, the icy wind in my whiskers, the endless rhythm of muscle and stone. The 3-day path fell away beneath me, collapsing into one long night. By the time the lights of Subrubasi shimmered faintly in the valley below, my legs burned, my breath heaved, and the pack's weight pulled at my jaw like an anchor. Still, I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the village. There, hidden among the shadows of the stone walls, I let the change roll back. The fire flickered, reluctant to settle, but at last I stood on 2 legs again, shaking, sore, and drenched in sweat. I dropped the pack at my feet, chest heaving. 1 day and part of a night. 3 days cut down to 1. I quickly found a place to get dressed, then went to the hotel and got a room for the night, and purchased a ticket for the first bus to Kathmandu in the morning. Then I fell into a dreamless night of sleep. Morning came too quickly. My body still ached from the run, every muscle tight, but the fire inside me hummed steady. I checked out of the hotel with the first grey light of dawn and boarded the bus. The seats were narrow, built for smaller frames than mine. At 6'8", I loomed awkwardly over the other passengers, knees pressed hard against the seat in front of me, shoulders squeezed into the aisle. A few travelers tried not to stare, but their eyes lingered all the same. In a country where the average man stood nearly a foot and a half shorter, I was impossible to ignore. The bus rattled its way down the winding roads, switchbacks clinging to cliffs that dropped into river gorges far below. For 9 hours, it swayed and jolted, the air thick with dust and diesel. My legs cramped, but I didn't complain. Compared to 3 days on foot, this was still easier. By the time we pulled into Kathmandu, the sun hung low, a hazy gold behind the veil of traffic and smog. The noise of the city hit me like another world, horns blaring, voices shouting, scooters weaving between cars. Even here, in the crush of people, heads turned when I passed. The height, the shoulders, the foreign face I couldn't fade in if I tried. I shouldered my pack and pushed through the crowds into the airport terminal. Inside, the air was cooler but no less frantic. Announcements echoed overhead, flight boards flickered. Seattle. New York. Choices. I hesitated, torn between Forks and Ithaca, just as I'd told Edythe. But first, the phone. The screen didn't even flicker when I tried to power it up, the battery was completely dead. I searched the terminal until I found a row of outlets along a wall, most already crowded with travelers hunched over their own devices. Even there, people's eyes flicked toward me as I loomed over the line, pack slung against my shoulder. Eventually, I found a gap, crouched down, and plugged in. The screen flickered back to life. It took nearly 15 minutes just to gain 1 bar of charge. It would have to be enough. I scrolled to Edythe's number and pressed call, my pulse quickening with each ring. Thomas. Her voice burst through, tight, as if she was trying not to talk too fast. It's me. Relief loosened something in my chest, hearing her voice. I was so close to seeing her again. I made it to Kathmandu. I'm looking at flights now, I just need to decide where to land first. Forks or Ithaca? There was a rush of air on the line, like she'd covered the receiver. Then her voice, urgent. Thomas. Alice had a vision. I froze. What kind of vision? Edythe's words tumbled fast, barely under control. She saw Bella jumping off a cliff into the sea. For a time, we thought her voice cracked, we thought she was dead. We flew to Forks as soon as Alice could confirm where she was. My breath caught. And she's alive, Edythe said quickly. Jacob pulled her from the water. She's shaken, but safe. But Thomas. Her voice faltered again. In the background, I could hear Alice's softer tone, words not meant for me but impossible to miss. He thinks she's dead, Alice said grimly. The words struck cold. My grip on the phone tightened. Who? Edythe's voice came back, Breaking. Edward. He called Bella's house. A stranger answered the phone at Charlie's house, Jacob, and he told Edward Charlie was at the funeral. He meant Harry Clearwater's. But Edward believed. Her breath hitched. He believes they were burying Bella. The world tilted under me, the noise of the terminal fading to a dull roar. And now? I forced the words out through clenched teeth. Alice's voice cut across the line, sharper this time. Now I have a vision of him in Volterra. With the Volturi. He's asking them to end his life. Chapter 130, Race to Volterra. Thomas POV. For a moment, I couldn't move. The words "he's asking them to end his life" echoed in my head, not in fear, or sorrow, but in disbelief. Edward was doing it again. Running from the wreckage he'd made and leaving everyone else to bleed in the fallout. The fire inside me surged, not from grief but from anger. He'd walked away from Bella to protect her, shattering her instead. And now, knowing what that had done to her, he was trying to erase himself to make his absence permanent. What would that do to her? To Edythe? To the rest of them? Selfish prick! I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. If he wanted to die, fine, but he didn't get to drag them down with him. The airport around me blurred into white noise, voices, engines, footsteps, all fading under a single pounding thought: I have to stop him. The fire inside me roared, surging against my skull like it wanted out. People turned when my chair scraped across the floor, but I didn't care. The bolt that should have held it down snapped free with a metallic pop I barely registered. I reached over, unplugged the phone charger, and slung my pack over one shoulder. Rome. Flight QR649, boarding in less than 45 minutes through Doha. Perfect. I forced my breathing steady enough to speak and bought the ticket on the spot, half the airport crowding around the counter behind me. The woman at the desk kept glancing up at me, probably not used to men who looked like they could lift the plane themselves, but she processed the booking without a word. First class ticket in hand, I stepped aside and dug out the satellite phone. The battery had crept up another bar before I'd unplugged it good enough for now. I started toward the gate as I dialed Edythe's number. The line connected. Edythe. Thomas, thank God. Did you get a flight? I'm booked, I said, checking the paper again. Kathmandu to Doha, then Doha to Rome. I'll be in Italy by morning. A muffled exchange on her end, Alice's voice in the background, rapid and controlled. Our route's set, Edythe said. Seattle to New York, then Florence. Bella's with us. She's shaken, but she knows she's the only one who can reach him. Good, I said. That'll keep her steady. She'll hold herself together for him. She's the only one he'll listen to, Edythe admitted. Alice says he'll petition the Volturi tonight, but he has plans if they turn him down. My jaw tightened. Then we move faster. I know he's your brother, Edythe, but if he survives this, he and I are going to have a talk. There was a pause, soft static breathing between us. Thomas, don't do anything reckless. The Volturi. Edythe, I cut in. Reckless is what's left. I'll call when I land. I could hear her start to protest, but the boarding chime echoed across the terminal, sharp as a bell. I ended the call before she could say another word and slipped the satellite phone back into its case. My pulse still hammered in my ears, but the decision was made, no turning back now. By the time I reached my seat, the cabin lights were dimming. First class extra legroom, but still too tight for someone my size. My knees brushed the bulkhead, shoulders edging into the aisle. I settled in anyway, eyes fixed on the window as the tarmac began to roll past. The plane lifted into the dark, the city lights shrinking below. My breathing steadied. This would be the hard part. Waiting and sitting still while I was in a hurry. Logically, I knew that I was on the fastest possible route, but not moving myself made me feel like I was not accomplishing anything. I tried to rest, but my mind kept circling back to Forks Bella's face, Edythe's voice. The choices Edward had made, and the ones they all had to live with. For all his talk about loving and protecting her, he never trusted Bella to choose for herself. Hours slipped by in silence until the cabin lights shifted to a pale dawn glow. I stretched, bones popping, and checked the flight map on the screen in front of me. Doha 30 minutes out. The terminal in Doha was polished stone and soft light, a quiet hum beneath the announcements echoing through the air. I stretched the stiffness from my legs and followed the flow of passengers into the main concourse. Everything gleamed glass, chrome, marble. It reminded me of the Cullens' home, precise, ordered, efficient. I found an empty corner near a charging station and pulled out the satellite phone. The screen blinked to life. Edythe answered on the first ring, her voice sharper than before. Thomas. Made it to Doha. The next flight's boarding in minutes. I'll be in Rome before sunrise. Relief edged her voice. Good. We have already boarded in New York for Florence. Alice says we should reach Volterra around noon local time. I adjusted the strap on my pack, pacing slowly to keep my body moving. And Edward? He's still in the city, she said. I could hear muffled voices behind her. Alice, calm and clinical, Bella, quieter, heartbeats of panic hidden under control. He's changed locations twice. Alice thinks he's scouting the area. She can't see clearly anymore but thinks he settled on the town square clock tower. Something's interfering. It's because I'm involved now, isn't it? I said. It blurs her sight. Exactly. There was a pause. I could almost hear her hesitation through the static. Thomas, we don't know what we're walking into. The Volturi aren't like other covens. They have rules. If they see you as a threat. They won't, I said flatly. Not unless they give me a reason. You can't face them alone. I won't have to, I said. You'll be there soon enough. Her voice softened. Please. Promise me you'll wait outside the city. I'll stay close enough to watch, I said, sidestepping the promise. Edythe sighed, quiet resignation carrying across the line. You always do what you think you must. Only when it matters, I said. Over the line, I caught the faint sound of Bella's voice asking something I couldn't make out. Edythe murmured a reply too low to hear, then came back to me. She says thank you, she told me. For what? For coming. I exhaled slowly, looking out through the wide glass windows. The edge of dawn had touched the horizon, soft gold against the black. Tell her to keep that feeling in mind when me and Edward have our discussion about his actions that caused this mess. The boarding call for my flight broke through the background noise. Flight QR 115 to Rome now boarding. That's me, I said. Thomas. I'll see you in Italy, I cut in, and hung up. I was so going to get in trouble for all this hanging up on Edythe I was doing. As I walked toward the gate, a few travelers stepped aside without realizing it. Maybe it was my size, maybe the look in my eyes. Either way, the crowd parted easily. I took my seat as the first hints of morning spilled across the sky. Rome. Then Volterra. The plane rolled to a stop, and the engines wound down into a low, steady thrum. Dawn had stolen the night, Rome lay pale and wide beneath us, cathedral domes and terracotta roofs catching the first thin light. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I moved through the aisle stiff, efficient. There was no time to waste, it was just after 8 a.m. Customs was a blur, a quick line, the indifferent nods of officers more bored than threatening, my pack slung over one shoulder. The terminal emptied into the morning air and the taxi rank, where a line of yellow cars waited in the filtered light. Men in dark jackets argued quietly with one another, cigarette smoke curling in the cold. I walked straight to the group, shoulders broad in the open space, and there was no mistaking how I looked impossible to ignore. They glanced up, naturally stepping a half-beat away. I pulled out my travel wallet and flashed the stack of American bills. I've got 1,000 in cash for anyone who can get me to Volterra before noon. Once we leave the city, I'll add $100 for every car you pass, but every car that passes you costs you 500. Any takers? 1,000 for Volterra, one of them said, half laughing to cover a flicker of interest. You know that's a long drive, amico. And regulations. He jerked his chin toward the airport authority in the distance. Regulations don't pay your rent, I said flatly. You want the money, or you want to stand here counting the hours? Chapter 131, The City of Red. Thomas POV. The man who finally stepped forward was wiry and young, with sharp eyes and the quick grin of someone who lived by instinct. I'll take your deal, he said. But if I get a ticket, you pay that too. Fine, I said. He barked something to the others in rapid Italian, probably claiming the fare as his, then waved me toward his car. It wasn't much, a compact sedan with a scuffed bumper and a half-finished bottle of water in the cup holder. But the engine sounded healthy, and that was all I needed. Name's Marco, he said as I tossed my pack into the back seat and folded myself in beside it. And you? Thomas. He nodded, sliding behind the wheel. Then hold on, Thomas. The tires chirped as we shot out of the airport lane and onto the Autostrada North. Rome blurred by in streaks of red tail lights and early sunlight glinting off car roofs. At first, the road was open enough that Marco could test the limits of his engine weaving through traffic, muttering satisfaction each time we overtook another car. I didn't count, he did, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel like a man keeping score in his head. He drove like a man with something to prove, smooth, confident, precise. The countryside began to shift from concrete to green, hills rolling wider with each passing kilometer. You said before noon, yes, he asked. That's right. He grinned. Then you shouldn't have offered so much money. We'll be early by 10 minutes if I drive normal from here out. The faster you get there, the better the tip, I said. He laughed, a quick bark of sound, and leaned harder on the gas. By the time the signs for Volterra began to appear, the road had narrowed into winding hills. The air carried the scent of cypress and dust, and the medieval skyline rose from the cliffs ahead, stone towers jutting up against a deep blue sky. The closer we got, the slower the traffic became. First locals, then tourists, then a long, creeping line of cars. Bells rang somewhere in the distance, echoing across the valley. Marco cursed softly under his breath. A parade, he muttered. Always a parade in these little towns. Then, with a flare of bright color, a yellow Porsche shot past on the shoulder, the engine's snarl slicing through the quiet like a blade. Marco blinked, then let out a disbelieving laugh. Ma cheing Edythe. That's not fair. You say every car I pass earns me money. What about one that passes me going like the devil himself? You know the deal. That's minus 500 like we agreed, I said, laughing. Moments later, he slapped his hand on the steering wheel in frustration after trying to follow the Porsche's example, edging onto the shoulder, but people weren't cooperating. The road was clogged tight now, the festival crowd spilling out from the stone gates ahead. I cannot take you farther, he said, frustrated. The square will be closed. Too many people. That's fine. I pulled the cash from my jacket and handed him the full amount, plus a few extra bills for his trouble. You got me close enough. I stepped out into the crush of noise and sunlight. The air was thick with voices, the heat rising from the cobblestones like a living thing. For a heartbeat, the press of bodies and the noise hit me harder than the light. Just months, maybe a year ago, a crowd like this would have locked my lungs, dragged me back to the echo of gunfire and screaming in that Denver mall. But the fear didn't come this time. The memory was there, yes, but dulled, filed into instinct instead of panic. I wasn't that kid anymore. I'd learned to move through noise without freezing, to read a crowd instead of fear it. I adjusted my pack and joined the current of red-cloaked bodies. Scarlet banners rippled from balconies overhead, each one emblazoned with a golden cross. The narrow streets pulsed with motion, men, women, and children wrapped in crimson, laughter and church bells tangling in the air. The scent of sun-warmed stone mixed with wine and sweat. A woman caught me pausing beneath a banner that read Festa di San Marco. She smiled, eager to share. Today we celebrate Saint Marcus. He saved Volterra from the vampires. I managed a polite nod. The irony twisted low in my chest. If only you knew. Saint Marcus hadn't saved anyone from vampires, he ruled them. One of the ancient three who still governed this city from its catacombs. The streets narrowed, funneling the crowd toward the clock tower. Its black face loomed above the roofs, the hands crawling toward 11:45. 15 minutes. Maybe less. The bells struck again, rolling through my ribs. I moved faster, scanning the press of red hoods for a familiar face or anything out of place. A small alley split off to the right. I slipped into it, letting the noise dim to a dull roar. The alley opened into a smaller square bordered by shuttered shops. From there I could glimpse the edge of the main piazza, bright, packed, feverish. Someone brushed past carrying a basket of roses, petals spilled across the stone like drops of blood. I followed them toward the main square, still looking for anyone familiar, paying special attention to dark alcoves that could hide a moron about to do something stupid. The square opened ahead of me in a blaze of sunlight and red. Flags whipped overhead, children waved banners, church bells and the clock tower thundered the noon hour so loudly it was hard to think. And in the center, framed by centuries-old stone, a figure stepped from a side alcove, moving towards the sunlight as he began unbuttoning his shirt. Edward. Then a voice I would recognize anywhere cut through the bells, a single, hoarse scream. Edward. Bella. She broke through the barricade, stumbling, running flat out across the square. Time compressed, the air seemed to shatter as she hit him, driving him back into the shadowed archway. I forced my way forward, ignoring the shouting around me. When I reached the alcove, they were there, Bella clutching him, Edward's hands hovering over her shoulders, disbelief raw on his face. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then I heard it, quiet, precise footsteps come from down the hall. 2 of them. Edward pulled Bella behind him. Greetings, gentlemen. His voice was trying to suggest calm and friendliness, on the surface. I don't think I will be needing your services today. I would appreciate it very much though, if you would relay my appreciation and respect to your masters. Perhaps we should take this discussion to a more private venue, came the reply, velvet soft, threaded with menace. Edward responded quickly, that won't be necessary, Demetri. My friends can rejoin the parade, and I will watch from here until night falls, and we will be gone from your city. The larger of the 2 cloaked figures stepped forward, his smile polite and sharp. I believe Demetri was merely pointing out that the sun will soon reach this enclave. So, we really should move somewhere more private. Edward inclined his head slightly. That's agreeable, Felix, just let me see these 2 back to the parade, and I'll accompany you both. After all, no rules have been broken here. Felix's grin widened. Rules are flexible in Volterra. His crimson gaze slid to me, then to Bella. And visitors rarely leave without a guide. I shifted, putting myself half a step forward close enough to draw their attention away from Bella. The air between us seemed to thicken, heavy and expectant, the calm before lightning strikes. Then new footsteps echoed down the narrow hallway, light but deliberate. While I kept my eyes on Felix and Demetri, I heard them approaching from behind. My fists clenched on instinct, heat stirring low in my chest. If they tried anything, I'd make sure the crowd outside noticed one way or another. A lilting, amused voice cut through the tension. Let's behave ourselves, shall we? Felix's head turned slightly, irritation flashing in his eyes. Then another voice followed, calm, sharp, and familiar enough to steal the breath from my lungs. There are ladies present, after all, Edythe said, her tone smooth as glass but edged like a blade. The Vulture stilled. Even monsters remembered their manners when she spoke. Especially when they realize they are now outnumbered by more than double. Alice joined Edward and Bella as Edythe stepped to my side. It took every bit of control I had not to reach for her and crush her to my chest. But I knew turning my back on these two would only invite danger. I took some joy in noticing that we had started to gain a small crowd staring at our group. This seemed to make the two cloaked figures nervous. Enough. The new voice was higher measured, commanding, and it came from behind us. I looked over my shoulder and saw a small dark cloaked figure leading several others towards us. The numbers were no longer in our favor. Chapter 132, Beneath the City of Red. Thomas POV. The side archway we stood in fell silent. Even the bells seemed to hesitate between strikes. The young girl in the dark cloak stepped forward, small and slight against the stone walls, but the space around her shifted as if gravity itself was hesitant to touch her. Behind her, more cloaked figures appeared, gliding in quiet formation until the hallway was half filled with black hoods and pale faces. Felix bowed his head. Jane. She didn't acknowledge him. Her eyes crimson and ancient despite the youth of her face moved over each of us in turn. They lingered on Bella, then on Edward, and finally on me. For a heartbeat her gaze sharpened, curious, like a cat noticing a sound that doesn't belong. Master Arrow will see you, she said simply. The words weren't a request. No one argued. Even Felix's easy confidence thinned to obedience. Alice's smile was faint and brittle. How gracious! Jane's lips curved, not quite a smile. Indeed. This way, please. The few people that had gathered to watch the group in the archway murmured in confusion as the Vulture began to move. To them it must have looked like a procession, black robes leading a group into the byways of the city. A guard stepped forward and pulled a grate aside in the wall. A staircase of worn stone descended into the earth, lit only by torches guttering in iron brackets. Edythe's hand brushed mine briefly before she followed Jane down. Her touch was cold, but it steadied me. I looked once toward the bright square behind us, the sunlight, the noise, the color, and then followed the others into the dark. The air grew cooler with every step, the noise of the festival fading. The hallway led to a locked gate that once opened, lead to stairs to take us below the city. The air changed the moment we stepped off the last stair. The warmth of the surface vanished, replaced by a chill older than the stone itself. Torches flickered along the walls, their light too thin to chase the dark. Only the escort moved with us, 10 vampires, gliding in a perfect formation. Jane led, her small frame cutting the air like a blade. Felix and Demetri flanked her, muscle and precision. The rest followed at measured intervals, silent and watchful. No other guards waited in the corridors. That was almost worse. The emptiness made every step echo like a heartbeat in a tomb. I studied them while we walked. Felix's stride carried the weight of a brawler, Demetri's was balanced, effortless. But Jane didn't walk like a fighter. She walked like someone who knew she would never need to fight. Something about her made my thoughts stumble. In the flickering light she looked young. Barely 11, maybe 12. Her face was smooth, still carrying the softness of a child. I leaned closer to Edythe, trying to keep my voice low. You told me once the Vulture forbid turning children. That it always ends in chaos. Her eyes stayed forward. They do. Children can't control thirst or temper. The law is absolute. Then what about her? I nodded slightly toward the small figure ahead of us. She looks. I didn't finish, but the word hung there anyway. Child. The corridor went still. Jane's steps halted mid-stride. She turned her head, just enough that one crimson eye caught the torchlight. Edythe's fingers brushed mine in warning. Too late. Jane's smile was delicate, deliberate. How observant, she said, her voice sweet as frost. Most people don't survive long enough to notice. Felix chuckled under his breath, but even he shifted a half step away from her. "I meant no insult," I said evenly. "Just, surprise." "Surprise," she repeated, testing the word like it was foreign. Her gaze slid over me, measuring, filing me away. "How refreshing." Edythe's tone turned crisp. "He's new to our world. His curiosity isn't disrespect." Jane's smile didn't change. "Curiosity can still be dangerous. Especially when it forgets its place." Then she turned and continued walking, her cloak whispering across the stone. The rest of the escort moved again, the rhythm restored, but the air hadn't recovered. It felt charged now like metal right before a lightning strike. Edythe exhaled softly beside me. "You just made a friend for life." "Didn't sound friendly." She gave me a flat look, as if I'd missed the obvious. "Sarcasm." I smiled sheepishly. "Hey, come on. I've been around Rohan too much lately. It's going to take some time to recognize tones." Her lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen from her since we started down here. We walked in silence after that. Even the torches seemed quieter. It was at that point that Edward finally spoke, his voice low. "Alice, what happened?" Alice's golden eyes flicked toward him, then around at the escort surrounding us. "It's a long story," she said, keeping her tone even. "In summary, Bella jumped off a cliff. But not in an attempted suicide, as I first thought." She paused, her expression turning sharp. "Apparently, Bella's into extreme sports these days." The scathing notes in her voice echoed off the stone. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me. Any sport Bella gets into becomes extreme. Usually for everyone involved, but especially for her. Bella flushed and ducked her head, refusing to look at anyone. A few of the vampires nearby inhaled lightly, their eyes flicking toward her. The sound was almost delicate, but I could tell they were savoring her scent. That sound made something low in my chest tighten. A growl escaped before I could stop it. Quiet, but enough. The escorts shifted, a ripple of alert motion that passed through their formation like wind through grass. Edythe's hand brushed my arm, just a warning touch. Edward went silent and turned his attention to Alice. For several seconds, the air felt heavy with something unspoken. His face fell into that familiar brooding mask of his. Whatever he'd read from her thoughts clearly wasn't pleasant. Good, I thought. He can sit with that for a while before I share my own disappointment over his choices. Shortly after that, the corridor opened into a landing before a massive set of double doors. Two vampires came from behind us and went to the doors, grasped the iron handles, and pulled them open. The hinges groaned faintly, the sound swallowed by the stone. The chamber was vast and cold, every sound swallowed by the stone. Several of the escorts spread out along the walls, their movements silent and rehearsed. Jane gestured for us to wait near the center of the room. "I shall inform them you are here." Then she and the others vanished through a smaller archway at the far end, their footsteps fading. For the first time since stepping foot in Volterra, I could breathe without feeling I had to rush somewhere. Edythe turned toward me the second the last cloak disappeared. I didn't even think I just moved. My arms went around her, pulling her close until her forehead rested against my chest. The chill of her skin seeped through my shirt, grounding me in a way no warmth ever could. "I have missed you so badly," I murmured. Her voice was soft. "Promise you won't leave me like that ever again." I kissed the top of her head, closing my eyes for a moment. "Only you asking," I whispered, "will ever be reason enough to separate from you again. Ever." A sound cut the moment in half, a short, derisive huff. "Edward." He stood a few paces away, arms folded, his jaw tight. "This isn't the time." I relaxed my death grip on Edythe and turned toward him, the calm that had carried me this far finally cracking. "No, it's the perfect time." Before anyone could stop me, I closed the distance between us. My fist connected with his belly hard enough that the sound echoed off the surrounding stone. Edward doubled over, any air in his lungs was forced out. That was for putting me and everything I love in danger. Edward straightened up and his eyes showed his shock that I had actually hit him hard enough to hurt. Even if Bella had chosen to end her life. I forced out, my voice cold. At least she didn't do it in a way that put her whole damn family in danger for her choice. My next blow landed across his cheek and forced him back several steps. Bella shouted for me to stop, and I turned on her in a flash. My finger pointed directly at her. And don't think you are getting away from this either, Isabella Swan. What the hell were you thinking? Delivering yourself here like a fucking bottle of 18-year-old red wine. Bella's face went red and she guiltily looked at the floor. Edward recovered enough to speak. I left to keep Bella safe, Thomas. She was in constant danger from being with me. I held my arms out, gesturing to our surroundings, and how is that working out for you? Think long and hard about how you coming here to get yourself killed would have affected your family. For you, it would be easy. Everything would be over, but all that pain you carried would just transfer tenfold to your family. Esme would feel she wasn't worth you seeking her out for help. Carlyle would blame himself thinking it was his fault in the way he raised you. I kicked Edward into the wall as I continued, my rage feeding my strength. Alice would forever blame herself because it was her visions that led to your stupidity. Rosalie for telling you about the vision. Your brothers Emmett and Jasper would probably spend the rest of their very short lives trying to take revenge for you. I could see my words impacting Edward by the loss of focus in his eyes as I approached him yet again. Reaching out to grab his shirt, I pulled him toward yet another fist that actually sent a crack along his cheek and jaw. When he yet again hit the floor, I finished. Your sister would have mourned you for her whole life, you selfish bastard. The echoes of my voice faded into silence. Then a door creaked open behind the wooden thrones, and a procession entered the room, a ripple of motion, dark and graceful. The first one through spoke in an amused tone, his voice smooth as silk. Ah! A family reunion and a brawl. How wonderfully dramatic! I met his eyes without flinching. Family disagreements can get messy. His smile deepened, faintly delighted. Indeed they can, he said. And I do so appreciate families that keep their disputes entertaining. Chapter 133, Some rules are flexible. Giving me a furious glare, Bella ran to Edward's side to help him up. I turned back to Edythe, guilt flickering across my face. I gave her an apologetic look for my outburst, but she didn't seem upset, not really. Knowing her, she probably agreed with most of what I'd said. When I looked back toward the thrones, I saw that the one I had spoken to now stood before the center seat. The other two thrones were no longer empty. The vampire on the left had dark brown hair that fell to his shoulders and an expression so lifeless it almost radiated boredom. He barely seemed present, his gaze unfocused, like he'd already lived long enough to lose interest in anything new. The throne on the right held someone younger in appearance, his features smoother, his posture sharper, but his hair was white, nearly the same shade as mine. It was hard to tell their heights while they sat, but the one in the center seemed slightly shorter than the others. His hair was glossy black, falling straight to his shoulders. His expression was calm, pleasant even, though something about it made my skin crawl. Their eyes drew me the most, all the same shade of cloudy red, as though centuries had dulled the color behind a thin layer of mist. And their skin wasn't like any vampire I'd seen before. Still pale, but not matte glossy, almost translucent. The torchlight didn't just reflect off them, it passed through, scattering faintly, like light striking glass or the surface of a pearl. They looked fragile, but I knew better. Fragility that old was never weakness, it was refinement, the kind that outlasts time itself. As I was inspecting our hosts, a side door opened, admitting another small group of vampires. Through the doorway, I caught a brief glimpse of what looked like a desk, a receptionist's desk with a woman standing beside it. I couldn't be sure, but the glimpse I caught of tan skin told me she was human. Weird. My attention shifted back to the newcomers. The lead figure removed his hood, revealing another vampire who, like Jane, looked far too young for the authority he carried. His features were almost identical to hers, sharp, pale, ageless. This had to be Alec, the brother Edythe had once mentioned. He walked directly to his sister, kissed each of her cheeks, and said with a smirk, "No fair, you found him first." His crimson eyes swept across our group. "And more than we expected." The boy turned to the man standing before the center throne and knelt. "Father Arrow," he said, his tone respectful, "forgive my tardiness. I thought our guest would be farther from the square." He gave an accusing glare at Edward. The black-haired leader's voice was smooth and indulgent. "No apologies needed, dear one. Join your sister. You've only missed the opening act of this delightful story." He turned his gaze toward Edward, his expression lighting with false warmth. "Dear boy, aren't you relieved now that we did not grant your request yesterday? It would have been such a pity." The man began to step down from the raised platform that held the thrones, his movement graceful, deliberate. A small girl slipped to his side, half hiding behind him but never breaking contact, her fingers brushing his sleeve as though the touch was necessary. "And this must be Bella," he said, his voice all silk and sympathy. "Such a wonder to see her alive. You seemed so certain when last we spoke." He paused, the faintest sigh escaping him. "I felt disheartened by your pain." Arrow descended the last step, his presence filling the chamber in a way that had nothing to do with his size. He moved with an elegance that was almost hypnotic, like each motion had been rehearsed for centuries. Edward stood tense, shielding Bella slightly with his body. The vampire's smile deepened at the gesture. "Ever the protector," he murmured approvingly. "How very human of you." Arrow then turned to Alice. "My dear Alice. How I have yearned to meet you. Edward's memories of you provided me with wonder untold in all my years." I heard Edward explaining to Bella that Arrow could read every memory a person had at a touch. When he finished telling her, Arrow broke in, "But dear Bella, it would be so much more convenient if I didn't need to touch someone. Much like young Edward here, when I was young, I could only hear a person's current thoughts. It took years to get to where I am now. It makes me wonder. Will Edward advance as I have as the years pass?" Then his eyes slid to Edythe, and his smile sharpened. "Ah, and let us not forget the stunning powers of the beautiful Edythe. The same gift as your brother, yet with the ability to silence it at will. And more still the power to bend others to your will with but a glance and a word. Magnifico." Arrow's gaze drifted toward me then, lingering for a single heartbeat. He said nothing aloud, but I caught the flicker in his expression, a shadow of uncertainty, curiosity tempered by something that looked almost like caution. He wasn't sure what to make of me yet. And maybe that unsettled him more than he'd admit. As if realizing he'd lingered too long, Arrow turned sharply, his cloak whispering across the floor as he climbed back toward the platform where the three thrones waited. "Come, brothers," he called, his tone bright and eager again. "Tell me, what do you think?" I nearly laughed when I noticed the little shadow clinging to his side, still trying to keep pace with him. She barely came up to his chest, her small hand gripping his sleeve like an anchor while he moved with unpredictable energy. Arrow stopped at the throne left from the center and extended his hand to the vampire who sat there, the one whose brown hair brushed his shoulders, his expression so utterly bored it was almost impressive. The vampire sighed and lazily raised a hand. He touched the center of Arrow's palm with one finger, then dropped it again. His face didn't change, not even a flicker of emotion. "Truly, brother," he said in a low, detached voice. "It is a wondrous sight to see. Your excitement is infectious." At my questioning glance, Edythe responded quietly. "Marcus can see the bonds between people," she murmured. "Apparently the ones between all of us, even you and Edward, are exceptional for our kind." On his way to the final throne, Arrow's smile brightened even more. So convenient, to not have to touch someone to know their thoughts. I thought I was far past jealousy. He shook his head slightly as he extended his hand toward the last of the 3 leaders. Chaos, I assumed. Whatever Chaos said, it clearly didn't please Edythe or Edward. Edythe's hand tightened around mine, her grip strong enough to crack bone if she wished. I was suddenly glad I hadn't let go of the fire still coiled inside me, the same fire I'd used to literally break Edward's face minutes before. Arrow's smile dimmed as he straightened. His eyes found Edward again, studying him, or more precisely, the arm he had wrapped protectively around Bella's waist. How can you stand so close to her like that? Arrow asked, his voice soft, curious, dangerous. Edward's answer came steady, though his tension was visible even from here. It's not without effort. Arrow's expression turned wistful, almost mournful. But still, la toi cantante. What a waste. Edward gave a short, humorless laugh. I look at it more as a price. Arrow arched a brow. A very high price indeed. Opportunity cost, Edward replied. The words seemed to amuse Arrow more than they should have. His laughter filled the chamber, light but unsettling, echoing faintly against the vaulted ceiling. If I hadn't smelled her through your memories, he said at last, I would never have believed the call of anyone's blood could be so strong. I've never felt anything like it myself. Most of us would trade much for such a gift, and yet, you waste it. Edward finished, his tone sarcastic. Arrow laughed again. Ah, how I have missed my friend, Carlyle. You remind me of him, only he wasn't so angry or broody. I chuckled at that last bit, but everyone ignored me. Well, Edythe gave an agreeing clench to my hand. Arrow's laughter faded, though the smile stayed. His gaze slid once more to Bella, curious and sharp. And yet, he said softly, she lives. A human who knows our secret surrounded by immortals. How extraordinary! Bella stiffened, but didn't look away. I'm not a threat to you, she said quickly, her voice steady even as her heart hammered loud enough for all of us to hear. Arrow's expression warmed, like a teacher amused by a student's confidence. No threat? Oh, my dear child, you are a threat. But not through malice. You are a variable in a carefully balanced equation. Mortality tends to complicate things. He turned slightly toward his brothers. Caius, Marcus, what say you? A human who knows our kind. Caius's answer came sharp and immediate. It is forbidden. His red eyes burned with disdain. The law is clear, brother. You indulge too much in sentiment. Arrow's smile faltered, though his tone stayed light. Ah, yes, the law. Marcus didn't bother to lift his gaze. It would be cleaner if she were silenced, he said flatly, as if discussing the weather. My hands clenched before I realized it. The fire under my skin stirred again in instinctive readiness, though I forced it down. Arrow waved one hand lightly, as if brushing away smoke. Clean, perhaps. But hardly interesting. His eyes found Bella again, gleaming. You see, my dear, some rules are flexible. A human who knows of us can live under certain conditions. Caius made a disgusted sound. You would gamble the secrecy of our entire kind on curiosity. On potential, brother, Arrow corrected smoothly. He turned to Alice, and the change in his tone was immediate, reverent, hungry. Which brings us, my dear, back to you. Alice met his gaze, calm but wary. You already know what I see. Yes, Arrow said, stepping closer, his eyes alight. But seeing it through your eyes is quite another thing. May I? Alice hesitated for half a second before offering her hand. Arrow's laughter rippled through the chamber again as he took her hand between both of his. For several seconds he stood perfectly still, eyes closed, expression shifting through curiosity, delight, and something that looked disturbingly like joy. When he released her, his voice was hushed, almost awed. Ah, she will join us. Bella blinked. What? Your future, my dear, Arrow said, smiling faintly. Alice sees you changed, remade. So our little problem solves itself. Caius hissed, unimpressed. So says a vision. And if the vision changes? Arrow only shrugged, unconcerned. Then we shall revisit the matter. But for now. He spread his arms, voice lilting again. No laws broken. No blood spilled. I am quite satisfied. I exhaled slowly, tension bleeding from my shoulders, though I didn't dare relax fully. The way Arrow's eyes flicked between me, Edythe, and Bella told me he wasn't finished cataloguing his curiosities. Chapter 134, Jane's Frustration. An. Hey all. Turns out I have a job interview in Rock Springs, Wyoming Tuesday. So I will be traveling on Monday and Wednesday, my normal release days. I decided to release both chapters today rather than be late with them, so here you go. Next release will be Friday 31st. Thomas POV. Arrow turned his attention back to Edward. I am still amazed by your restraint, he said, his tone reverent but edged with hunger. Know that, from someone who has shared both Carlyle's and your memories, your control of the thirst exceeds even his. He sighed, a sound almost wistful. I did not know such strength was possible. Descending the steps once more, he drifted closer, his expression glowing with false admiration. To inure yourself against such a siren's call, not just once, but again and again. If I had not felt it for myself, I would never have believed it possible. Edward didn't respond. His expression remained unmoved, a mask carved from stone. Arrow's lips curled in amusement. Just remembering how she appeals to you. He swallowed forcefully and chuckled softly. It makes me thirsty. My muscles locked before I even realized it. The flicker of fire under my skin begged to be released, but Edythe's hand found mine, a small, grounding pressure that told me to stand down. Then she stepped closer, sliding into my arms like it was the only safe place left in the room. The movement looked casual, but I could feel the tension in her frame, the quiet dread humming beneath her calm. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. And so was I. Don't be disturbed, Arrow said, his tone light, almost chiding. I mean her no harm. But I am so curious about one thing in particular. His eyes moved to Bella with undisguised interest. May I? He asked eagerly, lifting one pale hand. Ask her, Edward said flatly. Of course. How rude of me. Arrow's smile widened, all charm and curiosity. Bella, he began, voice warm and inviting, I am fascinated by your ability to frustrate Edward's most impressive talent. So very interested that such a thing should occur. He leaned forward slightly, his tone turning soft, coaxing. And I was wondering, since our two talents align so closely, if you would be immune to me as well. I watched Bella look towards Edward questioningly, and Edward nod in return. Then she hesitantly lifted her right hand, holding it out toward Arrow. Arrow smiled, what I think he believed would be a comforting smile, but it looked somewhat sinister to me. He then reached for her hand with his right hand as well, a practiced movement. His eyes stayed focused on Bella's face, and the slightest of frown tightened his lips before he sandwiched her hand in both of his own. Maybe he thought more contact would break through whatever blocked his power. His frown grew more pronounced for just a second longer before he began to smile in apparent wonder. So very interesting, he said as he dropped her hand and drifted back towards the throne steps. I couldn't help but see a flash of smugness cross Edward's face before he smoothed his features and held Bella comfortingly. I was surprised to not feel Edythe's muscles relax, believing the worst had passed. Arrow continued to drift along the bottom of the throne steps, his features locked in a thoughtful look. A first, he said to himself. I wonder if she is immune to our other talents. Jane, dear. No. Edward snarled the word. I saw Alice try to place a restraining hand on him, but he shook it off. I was even more surprised when Edythe clutched at both my arms that were clasped around her. both holding me and simultaneously creating a cage for herself. I saw the little figure of Jane smile in childlike happiness. "Yes, master." Edward's breathing picked up speed, and his exhales were coming out in a mix of hissing and growling. His eyes stared balefully at Arrow. Not acknowledging the reactions of his guests at all, Arrow spoke to Jane in a sickeningly sweet voice. "I was wondering, my dear one, if Bella is also immune to your ability." The words hit me, but their meaning didn't sink in until Jane's crimson eyes flicked toward me, pure euphoria in her expression, as if she'd been waiting her entire life for permission. She then turned to look toward Bella. That heartbeat of distraction gave Edward just enough time to move, placing himself between Bella and Jane. Her smile didn't falter. It sharpened. She focused her gaze on him, and in the next instant, Edward collapsed. His body hit the stone floor with a sickening sound. His mouth opened in a silent scream, every muscle locked so tight it looked like his bones might shatter under the strain. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. But every line of his face screamed agony. Jane's small smile stayed fixed, her expression one of utter, serene joy. "Stop!" Bella's voice cracked, raw with panic. She lunged forward, but Alice caught her by the shoulders, whispering something urgent that I couldn't make out. Seconds passed in agonizing slowness until Arrow spoke. "Jane," he reined her in with a tranquil voice. She looked up at him quickly, still smiling with pleasure, her eyes questioning. As soon as Jane had looked away, Edward's body relaxed. Arrow noted Jane's gaze and nodded his head toward Bella in an unspoken command. Jane turned again toward Bella. My body couldn't be any tenser, but my mind was preparing for action. I knew there was no way I could see Bella in that kind of pain and stay calm. Jane would be the first to die and then I would go after Arrow. I just hoped my shifted form brushing Edythe aside didn't hurt her too badly. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. As Jane set her eyes on Bella and waited. However, there was no reaction. Nothing, just Bella staring at Jane in anticipation of the pain to come. I relaxed my muscles and breathed a sigh of relief. Jane was no longer smiling, she was now glaring at Bella. Her jaw was clenched with the intensity of her focus. I saw many of the vampires in the room glance at each other wordlessly, asking if Jane was even trying yet. I was sure many thought she was merely playing with the little human. Edward had shakily moved to his feet and reached for Bella. I was impressed at how quickly he recovered. Arrow started to laugh in glee. "This is wonderful," he shouted after the short laugh. Jane hissed in frustration, leaning forward like she was preparing to spring at Bella. "Don't be put out, dear one," Arrow said in a comforting tone, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She confounds us all." Jane's upper lip curled back over her teeth as she continued to glare at Bella. I was tired of the games. The pretense of civility felt paper-thin now, and beneath it, I could sense the danger still coiling in every corner of this chamber. Despite their earlier words that Bella would someday join their kind, I couldn't shake the feeling that they might decide otherwise. The Volturi didn't need much of a reason to justify their actions. Some law or another would do just fine. I removed my arms from around Edythe and gently ushered her to my side. Then I looked at Jane. "You should be thanking Bella, Jane. Her ability to withstand you saved your life. In fact, she saved the lives of many in here." Arrow was the first to speak as many of the surrounding vampires tensed in weariness at my words. "Please do explain what you mean, young Thomas," came his reply to my words. I smiled in hopes that it would soften my words to less of a threatening tone. "Could you, Lord Arrow, stand aside as your loved one who is so fragile received pain of the likes that puts down one as strong as a vampire?" I let that sink in for a moment, "as you all struggle with your thirst for human blood. I struggle with my anger much the same way. You yourself have seen some of that struggle through Edward and Alice's memories." At my words I saw Arrow's eyes lose focus for a second as if he were trying to remember something. And when he refocused on me his eyes widened. "How wondrous!" he exclaimed. Carlyle does seem to find such wondrous companions to surround himself with. I confess myself envious of his luck." Silence reigned for a moment, before it was broken by a childish voice. "Master." "Yes, Jane. My dear one. You have a question?" Arrow replied. Jane nodded her head. "Master, I am curious if this man is also immune to my gift as the other one is." She gave me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Your safety is, after all, a concern if I cannot protect you." Arrow turned to me then, his black eyes glimmering with interest. "Well, young Thomas, shall we satisfy her curiosity?" Before I could answer, Jane's lips parted in a smile that was far too eager. Edythe's hand shot to my arm, her voice low. "No." Arrow's smile deepened. "Oh, but imagine what we might learn." I shook my head slowly. "You wouldn't learn much. All it would do is show us how much Jane enjoys the pain she inflicts on herself." Jane's smile faltered, the first crack in her composure. I was slightly disappointed that I couldn't make her feel her own ability, but even I knew better than to start a fight down here. There were too many, and I doubted any of us would walk out if things went wrong. "If you remember Edward's feeling of feedback when he tried to read my mind," I continued evenly, "you'll understand. I truly hope to leave here with my family in peace. And I'm afraid that wouldn't be possible if you believed I'd attacked one of your children." The word lingered in the air, soft but heavy with meaning. I let it hang there, the double edge of it gleaming, and watched the anger coil tight behind Jane's crimson eyes. I decided then, I liked her about as much as she liked me. So why play nice? Chapter 135, Quiet Joy in the Shadow of Death. Thomas POV. The silence that followed my words stretched thin and sharp as a blade. Even Arrow, ever the picture of poise, hesitated, his eyes flicking between me and Jane, weighing something behind that polite smile. Then he laughed, soft and brittle, the sound bouncing strangely off the stone. "How endlessly delightful you are, Thomas," he said. "Every word you speak lands like a story I've heard before." He took a step forward, fingers steepled, his voice dropping low. "Do you know, once long ago I read of creatures born of flame and hunger, hidden in the mountains east of Indus? Beings the old tongues called Rakshasa." His words caught the attention of every vampire in the room. Even Caius, who'd been leaning back with impatience, straightened slightly. "They were said to walk in mortal skins of man or beast," Arrow continued, almost wistful now. "They carried the fire of gods in their blood, and when provoked, that fire devoured all before it. They were neither human nor immortal, only wrath-given flesh." He turned his head slightly, his gaze settling on me again. "Carlyle and I once dismissed such tales as superstition, but now..." He trailed off, studying my expression. I didn't move. Didn't confirm or deny. Arrow's smile returned slower this time, without its earlier warmth. "Yes. I think perhaps I've grown old enough to believe in monsters again." Jane stiffened beside him, but before she could speak, Arrow placed a delicate hand on her shoulder, gentle, but firm. "My dear, I think our guest has made his point. Let us not provoke old fires that prefer to sleep. After all, no law has been broken here." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but his look silenced her. Off to the side, I caught Felix's face. His expression was tight, jaw flexing, crimson eyes flicking between Jane and Arrow. There was something almost protective in it, the faintest ache of loyalty, or something closer to love. But it was twisted by anger at her humiliation. When Arrow turned away, Felix's hand curled into a fist at his side. His glare found me for just a moment, and I could tell he blamed me for it. Arrow clapped his hands once, as though the tension hadn't just threatened to crack the air in two. "Well," he said brightly. "I believe we've reached an understanding, haven't we?" Caius made a low noise of displeasure but didn't speak. Marcus, of course, remained as impassive as marble. Arrow gestured toward us. You are free to go, my friends. Carry our goodwill back to Carlisle. Do give him my warmest regards and tell him I envy his luck once again. Edythe bowed her head slightly, cautious but composed. We will. Arrow's gaze lingered on me one last time. You may all wait outside for the new moon to rise. That should give you plenty of time to start your journey home. We turned toward the exit, the click of our steps echoing through the chamber. As we passed the row of guards, I felt Felix's stare on my back, a cold weight that promised our paths would cross again. And when I risked one glance over my shoulder, Jane was still watching me too. Her small, cruel smile returned, but her eyes no longer burned with triumph. Now, they burned with hate. Edythe tugged at my arm, urging me forward. Hurry, she whispered, her tone low but urgent. Heidi will be arriving soon with her catch of the day. Bella doesn't need to see what true vampires are capable of. I hesitated for just a heartbeat, listening. Footsteps. Dozens of them, too heavy, too steady to be guards. Human voices, hushed and oblivious, drifting closer through the corridors behind us. The sound hit harder than I expected. Those people were walking to their deaths. My fists clenched before I could stop them. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back to do something. But I could already feel Edythe's fear through her grip. She was right. Any delay, any sign of defiance now, would doom all of us. So, I forced myself to move. Each step away from that sound felt heavier, like I was dragging the weight of their voices behind me. I didn't look back, couldn't. Because if I did, I might not keep walking. The guard left us in what appeared to be a waiting room. In fact, it was the very same room I had seen when Alec entered the throne room, and I had been correct, the woman stationed there was human. I was grateful for the light classical music playing over the speakers while we waited for the sun to go down. The melody was gentle, almost cheerful, and that made it worse. Edward and Bella sat so close together they could have shared one seat. Alice paced a few feet away, her phone pressed to her ear, no doubt speaking with Jasper. And then, finally, I let myself look at the one person I'd been avoiding. Not because I didn't want to see her, but because I knew that once I did, I wouldn't be able to think of anything else. Edythe. I sat and pulled her into my lap. My arms wrapped around her, holding her to my chest with more strength than I'd ever used before. I felt her melt against me, her head settling on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. For a long while, it was enough just to exist together, breathing the same still air. After about an hour, the receptionist made her rounds, asking softly if we required anything. I didn't hear how the others answered, but both Edythe and I waved her off. I couldn't summon much pity for her. There was no way she didn't know what she was part of, but I didn't care enough to say anything either. Eventually, Edythe and I began to talk. Small things at first, the details we'd skipped over in phone calls, nights alone, half-remembered dreams, obviously mine only, the tiny, ordinary pieces of living that had kept us both moving. It felt strange, almost wrong, to be happy, to laugh quietly, to feel her cold fingers tracing idle patterns against my wrist when somewhere less than 30 feet away, dozens of people had just died. A little over an hour later, some guards escorted us back through the twisting corridors. The air above ground had shifted darker now, cool with the early breath of night. The festival had ended hours ago, leaving only scraps of red cloth caught in the gutters and the faint scent of wine clinging to the stones. Alice led the way, silent and sharp-eyed, scanning every shadow as we emerged into the alley. She didn't relax until we reached the small square where she'd left the car Edythe told me they had borrowed to get here from Florence. I laughed when I saw the yellow Porsche parked against the curb, a fine layer of dust dulling its shine. The same one that had caused my driver to despair as he lost out on $500. I should have known. Alice exhaled through her nose, muttering something that sounded very much like a curse in Italian before striding over to retrieve her luggage from the trunk after Edythe convinced her that the car was too risky to drive back to where they had borrowed it from. I waited near the mouth of the alley, my pack slung across one shoulder. The leather was still scuffed from my run down the mountain, the weight of it a reminder that I hadn't set it down since Nepal. Once we all had our luggage, we made for the city outskirts, keeping an eye out for any available transportation. Much to my surprise, a compact sedan pulled up, headlights washing over the cracked cobblestones. When the driver stepped out, I almost laughed. "Marco," I said. His face split into a grin. "Ah, the big American. Do you have any more deals you'd like to make?" I was hoping to find a passenger so the trip back to town isn't a loss. His gaze flicked over our group, Edward and Bella clinging to each other, Alice and Edythe with their luggage, and me standing there looking far too calm for the hour. "You look like people who want to be anywhere but here," he said. "You could say that." He nodded once, already moving to open the car doors. "Then you're lucky I couldn't find another passenger." "Where to this time?" Alice called over, tossing him a folded stack of euros. "Florence," she said. "And drive like your life depends on it." Marco's grin widened. "It very well might. I have a date tonight, and if I miss another one, my lady will be most displeased with me." He slid behind the wheel, the car humming to life again. Edythe brushed past me, touching my arm as she moved toward the back seat. "Come on," she murmured. "Let's go home." I gave the dark streets one last glance, Volterra sleeping under its ancient stones, the echo of bells still ringing faintly in my ears, and followed her into the car. Chapter 136, The Long Flight Home. Thomas POV. The lights of Florence spread below us like a constellation brought down to earth. After the silence of the countryside, the city's noise felt alive, the hum of traffic, voices, music spilling faintly from cafes still open near midnight. Marco pulled to the curb near the airport terminal and shut off the engine with a satisfied sigh. "See," he said, turning around with a grin. "All alive. No crashes. I even beat my own record." Alice handed him another stack of bills without looking up from her phone. "You drive like a madman, but you're efficient. Keep it that way." He blinked at the cash, then laughed. "If you ever need to escape another city, you know who to call." We unloaded our bags quickly. I adjusted my pack, the same one I'd carried from the mountains, and followed the others toward the terminal doors. Inside, everything was too bright. The harsh airport lights turned pale faces paler, and even the Cullen's smooth composure looked frayed at the edges. Bella moved quietly, keeping close to Edward, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something heavier, the aftertaste of mortality. Alice managed our tickets in minutes. First flight to Paris, then a connection to Seattle. She moved like she'd already memorized the entire route, her mind 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Edythe brushed my arm, her voice low. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though the truth was harder to name. "Just ready to be home." She smiled faintly, small, tired, but real. "Then let's go home." Edythe and I sat together near the back, a buffer of silence between us and the rest of the cabin. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her hair catching the faint light from the aisle. After a long moment she spoke, her tone casual, too casual. "So, were there any girls in Nepal?" I arched a brow, though she couldn't see it. "That sounds like a loaded question." The short flight from Florence to Paris was quiet as everyone seemed to spend their time working through the events of Volterra internally. The Paris connection was a blur of security lines and half-understood announcements. By the time we boarded the long flight west, the adrenaline had bled away, leaving only fatigue. The cabin lights dimmed soon after takeoff. Most of the passengers settled into the soft hush of sleep, but rest didn't come easily to any of us. Bella sat across the aisle, her head resting against Edward's shoulder. Her eyes kept fluttering closed, then snapping open again, like she was afraid the world might change if she blinked too long. Edward whispered something low and soothing that made her shoulders relax, but her gaze stayed fixed on him, stubbornly awake. A few minutes later, she pressed the call button and asked the attending stewardess for a soda. Edward's sigh was quiet, affectionate, resigned. I had to fight a smile. Her low tolerance for caffeine would keep her wired for hours, but knowing Bella, that was exactly the point. She wasn't about to sleep through a single second she could spend with him. Across the aisle, Alice sat a few rows ahead, pretending to read a fashion magazine but really staring out the window at the thinning stars. Every so often she'd smile faintly, like she was seeing a vision she didn't intend to share. Edythe and I sat together near the back, a buffer of silence between us and the rest of the cabin. She leaned her head against the seat back, her eyes half closed but not resting. Her stillness wasn't sleep, it was thought. After a while, she turned slightly toward me, her voice low enough to be lost under the hum of the engines. "So," she said, "how was life in the mountains when you weren't wrestling fire or meditating with Rohan?" I smiled faintly. "Quieter. Colder. Simpler." Her golden eyes opened fully now, studying me. "And the people?" I hesitated, realizing where this was going. "Tough. Focused. Good-hearted. Any of them, friendly?" The question was casual, but there was an edge to it, a teasing, almost playful tension. I couldn't help the grin that tugged at my mouth. "One or two. But only one that really stood out." Edythe arched a brow. "Oh. She was talented," I said, careful to keep my tone even. "Fast. Ambitious. Maybe too ambitious." Her expression shifted, somewhere between curiosity and mild possessiveness. "What did she want from you?" I exhaled through my nose, a small laugh escaping. "Apparently, my genetics." "Said she wanted my strength in her clan line." Edythe blinked once, then scoffed. "So romantic." "Right." I said. I told her I was already taken. Her voice softened, but her eyes gleamed. "And did she believe you?" I laughed. "She offered to share." For a moment, Edythe didn't answer. Then she leaned back in her seat, studying me with that calm, golden gaze that could see straight through pretense. "Well," she said finally, her tone thoughtful rather than angry. "Sharing isn't always wrong, but it depends on why." That caught me off guard. "Oh." She nodded once, gaze drifting toward the dark window where dawn still hadn't reached. "There's a difference between wanting to possess something and wanting to belong with someone. What she wanted from you sounded like ownership." Her fingers brushed mine, soft and deliberate. "I could never share out of greed. But love, real love, has room, if it's freely given." I looked at her, struck silent for a long moment. "That's not the answer I expected." A small, knowing smile curved her lips. "I've had a century to think about what I can live with, Thomas. Jealousy isn't the same as love. Not for me." She leaned back slightly, eyes tracing the faint reflection of light on the cabin wall. "You forget, I've shared before. Once." The tone of her voice told me she wasn't embarrassed, just remembering. "Kate," I said quietly. Edythe nodded. "It wasn't the same kind of love I feel with you." But she understood what it means to give without fear, to choose closeness instead of control. That's rare, even among immortals. Her gaze slid back to me, soft but direct. "So no, the idea of sharing doesn't frighten me. But it would have to be someone who belongs with us, not someone trying to take a piece of what we are." Something in her words settled deep in my chest. It wasn't permission, it was trust. And that felt heavier, more sacred than anything else she could have said. I smiled faintly. "You always surprise me." Edythe's lips curved just enough to show the edge of a smirk. "I should hope so. You'd get bored otherwise." I chuckled softly, but the warmth of her words pressed against something in me that wasn't ready to stay exposed. I leaned back, looking past her toward the other side of the cabin. Across the aisle, Bella was still wide awake, her fingers tangled with Edward's like she was afraid to let go. Every time he shifted, even to adjust his seatbelt, her grip tightened, a quiet panic she probably didn't even realize she was showing. "She's terrified," I said quietly. Edythe followed my gaze. "Of what?" "That he'll leave her again," I said. "She's not resting, not because she's afraid of sleeping, but because she's afraid of waking up alone. She's watching him like he might vanish if she blinks." Edythe studied Bella for a moment, then exhaled softly. "You're probably right." I shrugged, pretending it was a casual observation. "It's hard to build trust after that kind of break." Her hand brushed mine again, but this time I didn't look her way. I wasn't talking about Bella anymore, and we both knew it. The silence between us stretched, not uncomfortable, just honest. The hum of the engines filled it, a steady rhythm against the weight of our thoughts. The airport in Seattle was half asleep under the weight of early dawn silver light just beginning to touch the glass walls as we stepped through the arrivals gate. Alice spotted Jasper before the rest of us. He stood just beyond the security line, motionless, but his posture gave him away. He wasn't breathing. The moment Alice appeared, the stillness broke. He was at her side as quickly as he could be while keeping the human masquerade for the humans in the area. His hands framed her face like he had to be sure she was real, and while there were no other shows of affection, anyone looking at them looked away like they were intruding on something profoundly intimate. Alice only smiled, small but steady, and whispered something that made his eyes close briefly, a silent exhale of relief. The rest of the family waited a few steps back. Esme was the first to move. She crossed the floor with that soft, measured grace only she could manage, her arms open. Edward didn't hesitate. For a moment, the air around them felt lighter. "I'm so glad you're safe," she whispered against his shoulder, but her tone shifted when she pulled back. Her golden eyes looked as if they should have tears in them. "But don't you ever put us through something like that again, do you understand?" Edward's voice was quiet. "I do. And I'm sorry." Esme's expression softened, but the hurt didn't fade. She turned her gaze briefly toward Bella, full of love and appreciation for what she had done, before she reached to smooth Edward's hair like he was still her boy, still her son who'd scared her half to death. Carlisle stood a step behind her, his expression calm but shadowed. "You made your choice," he said, his tone even but heavy. "And I won't judge the pain that led to it. But Edward, you must understand, your choices echo through all of us." "I know," Edward said, his voice barely more than breath. Carlisle placed a hand on his shoulder, a father's touch filled with understanding and disappointment all at once. "Good. Then learn from it." Chapter 137, The House That Waited. We left the airport lobby, grateful there was no luggage to claim, everything we'd brought was small enough to carry. Esme's expression turned stricken the moment she looked at Bella. No one could disagree with her. Bella was out on her feet, only her stubbornness was keeping her upright. As we stepped into the parking garage, two familiar figures waited by Carlisle's Mercedes and Esme's SUV. The uncharacteristic shame on Rosalie's face told me why they hadn't come inside. Surprisingly, it was Emmett who spoke first, breaking the silence before it could stretch too long. He stepped forward, collecting Bella's small carry-on from Edward's hand. "How about Rose and I take Bella and Edward to Charlie's?" he suggested. "It'll give us some time to work out some stuff." His voice faltered slightly as he glanced toward Rosalie, but she didn't look away. No one objected. Edward only nodded stiffly, ushering Bella into the back seat of Carlisle's car. The gratitude in his eyes didn't quite reach his expression, but the relief was there. I grabbed Edythe's bag, and Jasper took Alice's. We followed Esme to the rear of her SUV as she opened the hatch from the driver's seat. The echo of our steps was the only sound in the concrete stillness. When I tossed my pack inside and reached to close the hatch, Jasper's voice stopped me. "Thomas," he said quietly. I turned, half expecting another tactical suggestion about the drive ahead. But his posture was tense, shoulders squared, eyes down. "I can't apologize enough for losing control at Bella's birthday party," he said. "Everything that's happened since, it feels like the fallout of that one mistake. My weakness." He paused, glancing toward Alice where she sat in the SUV, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "When I heard you'd gone to Volterra to meet them, he hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I was relieved. Because I knew you'd tear through that city to keep them safe, even if you were really there for Bella." I didn't interrupt, though I could feel the sincerity radiating off him, that soldier's honesty that never quite shakes the habit of confession. He went on, voice quieter. "I'll never stop feeling like I owe you for that. For both those days." I studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You don't owe me anything, Jasper. We all make mistakes that ripple farther than we mean. What matters is what you do after." His eyes lifted, golden and clear. For the first time since we'd landed, he looked lighter. "I'll try to remember that," he said. Edythe's voice drifted from the passenger seat, dry but affectionate. "Are you two finished competing over who is more emotionally oppressed?" Jasper's mouth quirked. "Almost." I shut the hatch and climbed in beside Edythe, and Jasper sat next to Alice. Esme glanced back through the mirror, her face soft with a mix of relief and peace. "I don't think I've ever been so grateful to have everyone home in one piece," she said. The SUV hummed to life, headlights cutting through the dim light of the garage as we followed the others out into the cool Seattle morning. The city gave way to forest in slow, dissolving stretches, the grey light of morning softening into mist over the trees. Seattle fell behind us, its hum replaced by the rhythmic whisper of tires over wet asphalt. Esme drove with steady hands and the calm of someone who'd spent decades carrying the weight of others and somehow never faltered beneath it. Her gaze flicked to the mirror occasionally, not for traffic, but to look at us, to make sure we were still there. The quiet inside the SUV wasn't awkward or strained. It was the silence of people who had run out of fear but hadn't yet found words for relief. The kind of stillness that settles in after a storm, fragile but welcome. For a long time, the only sounds were the faint hum of the road and the soft breath of rain against the windshield. Then Esme spoke, her voice low and reflective. "You know," she said, "I sometimes forget how fragile peace can feel. How easily it slips away, and how fiercely I want to hold on to it when it returns." Her eyes met mine briefly in the mirror before sweeping across the others. "You brought my family home safe," she said softly. "For that, I'll always be grateful." I didn't reply, partially out of discomfort, but also because I didn't do it alone. But knowing now wasn't the time to object, I let her words hang in the air, filling the space between us with something almost warm. Edythe reached for my hand, her fingers cold but steady. The gesture didn't need words. Outside, the forest thickened around the highway. Fog clung low between the trees, silver in the early light. The sound of the rain deepened, steady, rhythmic, familiar. No one spoke again for the rest of the drive. We didn't need to. By the time the "Welcome to Forks" sign flashed by the headlights, the world felt smaller, quieter, like it was holding its breath along with us. The drive up the long gravel road to the Cullen house was quiet. The forest seemed to close in around us, mist curling between the pines like something alive. The rain had settled into a light drizzle by the time Esme turned into the drive. The house waited ahead, tall, glass, and shadowed under the heavy canopy. Even through the rain-streaked windshield, I could tell something felt off. The place looked still. Too still. When Esme unlocked the front door and pushed it open, the reason became clear. White sheets covered nearly everything. The couches, the piano, even the framed photographs had been veiled in dustless cloth. The air smelled faintly of cedar and emptiness, a home that had been waiting too long for its family to return. Carlyle stepped inside first, his gaze sweeping the room with quiet reverence. It feels like it's been years, he murmured. Esme moved past him, pulling one of the sheets from the sofa. The motion sent a small cloud of dust dancing through the sunlight that filtered weakly through the rain. Let's fix that, she said softly. Edythe followed me in, brushing my arm as I set my pack down by the stairs. The thud of it against the wood felt loud in the stillness. Jasper hesitated in the doorway, his eyes shadowed. It's strange, he said. The house looks the same, but it feels different. Before anyone could answer, the crunch of tires broke the silence. The Mercedes rolled to a stop outside. Emmett came in first, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. Rosalie followed a step behind him, expression carefully neutral but not cold. Well, Emmett said, rubbing the back of his neck, that went about as well as we could hope. Which isn't saying much. Carlyle looked up from where he was removing another sheet from a chair. Charlie. Emmett huffed out a laugh that carried no humor. Piss doesn't even start to cover it. He took one look at Bella in Edward's arms and nearly had a coronary. I think if she hadn't been half dead on her feet, he'd have thrown Edward straight out the door. I winced softly, maybe I should have gone with them. Emmett shrugged. Bella woke up enough to say a few things to Charlie and Edward convinced him to let him carry Bella to her bed. But as soon as Bella was out cold and Edward let her go, he marched him right out the door. No yelling, no threats, just pure, cop-grade authority. Edythe exhaled softly. That sounds like Charlie. Yeah, Emmett said, but don't worry, Edward didn't go far. He's probably sitting under her window right now like a lovesick raccoon. Rosalie rolled her eyes but didn't contradict him. At least this time, Charlie knows she's alive and safe. That's more than we had 24 hours ago. I had to agree there, not knowing has got to be the worst. Rosalie lingered near the doorway as Emmett spoke, her arms crossed tight over her chest. For a moment, I thought that was all she intended to say, her silence had always been her armor. But when the others began to move deeper into the house, she didn't follow. Instead, her eyes flicked toward me. Thomas, she said quietly. I turned, not sure what to expect. Her voice was steady but soft. I owe you an apology. That alone was enough to make the room go still. Even Emmett glanced over, eyebrows raised. Rosalie's gaze didn't waver. When Edward called, if I hadn't told him what I heard as if it were fact, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't have been dragged into it. Bella wouldn't have had to. She stopped, shaking her head once. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. I studied her for a moment, recognizing how much those words cost her. There's nothing to apologize for. You just didn't have all the facts. She frowned, but not in anger, more like disbelief that I'd made it sound that simple. Still, she said, her voice quieter now, thank you. For going after him. For saving them. For all of it. Emmett walked back to Rosalie, his hand settled lightly on her shoulder. Told you he's too decent to hold a grudge, he said with a grin that softened the edges of the moment. Rosalie gave a faint, almost reluctant smile in return, then turned away, brushing past him toward the stairs. The house was quiet again, except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. Edythe slipped her hand into mine. That was rare, she murmured. What, Rosalie apologizing? Her lips curved faintly. No. You letting it go that easily? I smiled and squeezed her hand gently. We've all had enough blame for one lifetime. Outside, the forest whispered under the rain, alive again, but waiting. And for the first time since walking through the door, the house felt like home. Chapter 138, The Quiet Before. By the time noon rolled around, the Cullen house looked almost alive again. The white sheets were mostly gone, the air smelled faintly of cedar polish and rain, and the quiet hum of conversation filled the rooms. Carlyle had retreated to his study, Esme was reorganizing the kitchen, and Emmett and Rosalie were out in the garage, the low murmur of their voices barely audible over the faint clink of metal. It felt peaceful. For the first time since Italy, there was no tension pressing me forward at a panicked pace. That was my cue to leave. I found Esme near the stairs, carefully rearranging one of her framed photographs. "I think you're winning the battle," I said, nodding toward the now spotless living room. She smiled, soft and content. "It feels good to put things back where they belong. Then I'll get out of your way. I should check on my place before I start growing roots here." Edythe's voice drifted from behind me. "You mean our place," she corrected lightly. I turned, and she was standing there with her arms folded, her expression equal parts teasing and expectant. "Right," I said with a small grin. "Our place." Esme's smile widened knowingly. "Go on, you two. You've both earned some quiet." The drive through the forest was calm. Carlyle had offered up his car as the others other than the Escalade, were all still in New York. The drizzle had lightened to a soft mist, and the damp road stretched out in front of me. Edythe sat beside me, her presence quiet but unmistakably warm, her gaze flicking between the passing trees and my face as though she couldn't decide which she preferred watching. When we pulled up the narrow dirt drive that led to my house, I noticed the porch light was still intact, though coated with a thin layer of dust. The rain had kept the air clean but left the windows faintly streaked. The place looked exactly how I'd left it, only neater. "You've been here," I said, stepping onto the porch. Edythe smiled faintly, brushing her fingers along the railing. "Of course. I couldn't just leave it as it was. You'd never forgive me for letting the house return to rusting away." Inside, the air carried her faint scent, pine, ozone, something crisp and faintly electric. Everything was in perfect order. However, it was like the Cullens' house, covered in sheets and waiting for my return. "I only closed things down," she said casually, moving toward the kitchen. "Drained the water lines, unplugged the appliances, aired it out, then covered what I could before we left. I wanted it to be ready when you came back." I set my pack by the door and turned toward her. "You really thought I would?" She looked over her shoulder, eyes bright. "I knew you would." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Once Esme finished her renovations, the house had been quiet, functional, a place to rest between everything else. But standing here with Edythe now, it actually felt like a home. Edythe leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me. "You should sleep," she said softly. "You haven't closed your eyes since yesterday morning's flight." "I'm fine." She tilted her head, smiling like she'd already called my bluff. "You're human, Thomas. That means you need sleep. Unless you plan to spend the next day stumbling through forks like a zombie." I smirked. "Pretty sure I could still outrun everyone in town." She said, taking a small step closer. "And yet, even tigers have to rest." She was right, and we both knew it. My body was beginning to feel it, the ache behind my eyes, the heaviness in my shoulders. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. "I'll go to bed in a couple of hours." She arched a brow, unconvinced. "You said that an hour ago." I chuckled quietly. "I need to stay up at least until 8 or 9. Remember, I am used to only sleeping around 5 to 6 hours." Her smile softened, and she brushed a hand against my chest. "Fine. Let's pull the dust sheets off and put them away." She held up my backpack that had held my whole life these last 6 months. "Should I take this up to our room?" I smiled at her use of our. At every turn, as if she needed to stake more of a claim than she already had. "There are some books in there that I brought for Billy Black. They were written by his grand-aunt, I think would be the proper term. It may be important to the tribe one day, so I felt like I had to bring it back." Edythe opened the bag and pulled the 3 books out, and quickly thumbed through them. "Hope you don't mind if I read them, they look interesting." I just shrugged and indicated the sheet covering the couch. "You get one side, I'll get the other." Should be no time at all before we are done. Later that evening, I finally collapsed onto the bed. Edythe had gone still near the window, the faint outline of her form haloed by the last light before dark. I watched her for a moment, that impossible stillness that no human could ever hold before exhaustion finally pulled me under. The rain deepened outside, steady and calm before finally breaking. And then, somewhere near 2 am, the sharp buzz of my phone on the nightstand pulled me from sleep. I blinked, groggy, and reached for it. Thomas. Bella's voice came through the line, quiet, tense. I sat up, instantly awake. Bella? What's wrong? Her hesitation was brief but heavy. Can you meet me at the Cullen house? There's something I need to talk to everyone about. It's important. I rubbed a hand over my face. You mean now? Yes, she said. Now. Her tone left no room for argument. I glanced toward the window. Edythe was already watching me, eyes sharp, like she'd known before I did that the call would come. I noticed one of Ilarime's books in her hand. We will be there as quickly as we can, I said into the phone. She nodded once, already moving for the door. Looks like peace didn't last long, I murmured. Edythe's faint smile was half amusement, half resignation. It never does. I ended the call and put the phone back on the bedside table. You heard? I asked Edythe, who was sitting next to me with the book still in her hand. I heard. She got up and moved to the dresser, pulling out sweats and a shirt. Are you wearing these and driving, or are you running and I'm carrying them? Bella said it was important, so I decided to run, besides I could show Edythe one of my new forms. I stood, stretching the stiffness from my shoulders. Running's faster, I said. And I want to show you something new. Edythe's brow lifted slightly, a spark of curiosity flickering behind her composed expression. New? Yeah, I said, grinning faintly. You've seen the full tiger. This one's smaller. A little more discreet. Her lips curved. You? Discreet? Relatively speaking, I said, just remember to bring the clothes. I'm not walking back through the forest naked again. She smirked, voice a velvet whisper. I wouldn't complain. Maybe not, but Charlie might if someone sees me and calls him. That earned a soft laugh before she crossed to the door. After placing my clothes in a new backpack, she slung it over her shoulder. All right, then. Let's see it. I stepped out onto the porch, the night air cool and damp from the rain. The forest beyond was a stretch of silver mist and shifting shadow, the scent of pine heavy in the air. Edythe stood just beyond the threshold, her golden eyes gleaming faintly in the low light. She didn't move, she never did when I shifted, but her focus was absolute, the scientist and the lover both watching the lines blur between human and something more. The fire rose in me instantly, not burning, not painful, just alive. My pulse thundered once, then my body folded in on itself. The ground met me in silence. When the shift settled, I stood lower to the earth, smaller, leaner. A half-sized version of the tiger, built for stealth instead of pure power. Edythe's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. You weren't exaggerating, she whispered. You're beautiful. I rumbled low in my chest and thought, thanks, gorgeous, but it's just the usual colors, only smaller. She knelt and brushed her hand through the fur at my neck. Efficient, she added, and I could hear the note of admiration that slipped through her tone. All right, tiger. Let's see how fast you can get there. I nudged her hand once, then bounded into the trees. She was right behind me, her movements so smooth she barely disturbed the rain that clung to the leaves. The forest whipped past in a blur of motion and sent wet soil, cedar, the faint trace of the Cullens' home ahead like static in the air. Every stride came easy, the world sharp and focused through this form. Edythe stayed just to my right, her gaze flicking toward me every so often, part curiosity, part quiet awe. When the Cullen house finally came into view, its windows glowing faintly against the dark, I slowed. The shift back came easier now, a ripple, a breath, and then I was kneeling in the wet grass, human again, rain cold against my skin. Edythe appeared at my side almost instantly, holding out the folded clothes with that same faint, knowing smile. I took the bundle with a grin. Thanks, love. A few minutes later, dressed and human again, we crossed the clearing together. The rain had softened to a whisper. Through the window, I could see the family gathered. Edythe reached for the door handle, pausing just long enough to meet my eyes. Ready? Sure, let's see if they know what this is about. She pushed the door open. The soft hum of voices cut off, and all attention shifted toward us. Chapter 139, A Family's Vote. Thomas POV. The Cullen house glowed softly against the night's mist when Edythe and I stepped inside. The faint scent of cedar polish and ozone hung in the air, mixing with something sweeter, that strong, cold sugar fragrance that always clung to this family. The front room was alive with quiet motion. Carlyle stood near the wide glass windows, the grey light turning his skin faintly luminous as he folded his hands behind his back. Esme sat on the arm of a couch nearby, her expression calm but tight, a practiced serenity with strain beneath it. Across the room, Jasper leaned against a pillar, arms folded loosely, posture relaxed in a way that fooled no one. Alice perched on the back of the couch beside Esme, her gaze distant, watching a dozen possible presents at once. Rosalie stood by the piano, arms crossed, every line of her posture carved from ice. Emmett hovered near her, restless energy coiled in his broad frame, his attempts at conversation already silenced twice by a single look from Rosalie. When Edythe and I entered, the murmurs stopped. Carlyle turned toward us with a polite, strained smile. Thomas. Edythe. I'm glad you came. Alice was just bringing everyone up to speed. About Volterra, Alice added quickly, her tone lighter than the room felt. I nodded and moved to the empty love seat near the center of the room. Bella called, I said. She asked us to be here before she and Edward arrive, she wants a family meeting. Edythe sat beside me, her hand brushing mine briefly, a small, grounding touch that drew a line of calm through the tension. Alice folded her hands primly on her knees. I've already gone over what happened in Italy. From when Edythe and I arrived at Bella's house to the moment Errol let us leave. Edythe's voice was quiet, but sharp. Including his interest in Bella. Alice's eyes flicked to her. And in Thomas. That turned every gaze in the room toward me. Carlyle sighed softly. Errol never forgets a mystery. His curiosity is dangerous. It's more than curiosity, I said, leaning forward. It's control. He wants to understand what he can't command, because the moment he understands it, he can use it. Jasper's expression darkened. And until he does, he'll keep watching. Carlyle inclined his head. Yes. Errol made it clear, he intends to observe Bella's progress. Which means we'll be observed too. Edythe's eyes hardened slightly. He also saw Thomas through Edward and Alice's memories. The connection intrigued him. Rosalie's brow arched. Alice said he compared you to something, a legend. Rakshasa, I said. Old Hindu myths. Fire-born predators that can walk as man or beast. He wasn't wrong about the shape, just the intent. Emmett let out a low whistle. So basically, you scared a vampire king with folklore. Not the worst outcome, I said dryly. It kept them from testing me. Carlyle's tone gentled, though the weight behind it didn't fade. Arrow's fascination isn't admiration, Thomas. It's hunger, for knowledge, and for power. I met his gaze evenly. Then we'll have to make sure he gets neither. That drew a faint murmur of agreement, tension shifting but not lifting. Before we go any further, I said, there's something I need to tell you. Something I found in Nepal. It's about the clans, how they began, and what they were made for. That earned the full attention of the room. Jasper straightened, curiosity flickering through his composure. Something new. Something old, I said. Very old. The monks I trained with, Rohan's people, keep oral histories that go back before written language. Stories about what the first change was meant to protect, and about what came before it. Rosalie tilted her head slightly. Before shifters. Before either of us, I said. Before vampires, before the fire. Edythe's gaze flicked to me, quiet, unreadable, but intent. Carlyle stepped closer, voice soft. Then this is something we should all hear. I nodded once. We should, but not yet. It ties directly to Volterra, and to Bella. I'd rather wait until she and Edward get here. It'll make more sense when everyone's in the room. The rain filled the silence that followed, soft, steady, endless. Then Alice's focus snapped back into the present. They're almost here, she said. 2 minutes. Edward's carrying her. Esme rose from the couch, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her blouse. Then we'll wait. The quiet that followed was thick with expectation. Moments later, the front door opened. Edward entered first, his expression drawn but controlled. Bella followed close behind, pale but resolute, her hand still in his. Carlyle's voice broke the stillness with gentle warmth. Welcome home. We were just discussing what comes next. Bella met his gaze steadily. Good, she said. Because that's exactly why I'm here. Carlyle nodded once, calm but deliberate. Very well. I suggest we take this to the dining room table. His eyes flicked toward her, then to me. It's where we, as a family, prefer to have our serious discussions. Everyone began to move to the table in a way that suggested it had become something of a ritual for them. Edward sat Bella next to him, and Edythe pulled me to where she usually sat. I didn't ponder on when the exact number of chairs had been added, just accepted it. The dining room was bright and austere, the polished table gleaming under the soft glow of the overhead lights. It was almost ironic, really, a table meant for meals that no one here would ever eat, yet it had become the center of every choice that mattered. I corrected myself mentally that I had, in fact, used this table for its intended purpose, and maybe Bella, but knowing her, I doubted it. Carlyle took his place at the head, Esme beside him. Alice and Jasper sat next to each other, quiet but alert. Rosalie lingered at the edge of the table, not sitting until Emmett rested a steadying hand on her shoulder. When everyone was settled, the silence that followed was expectant, heavy but not hostile. Carlyle folded his hands in front of him. Alice has told us everything about Volterra, and what was said there, he began, his tone calm but edged with gravity. But before we come to any decisions, Bella, you asked to speak. The floor is yours. Bella hesitated only a breath before she nodded. Thank you, she said softly, her fingers tightening around Edward's. I could see the urge to shrink away from the attention, but she pushed past it. She took a breath that trembled just a little. I know everyone here has already been through so much because of me, she began, her voice steadying as she spoke. And now, with what happened in Volterra, your worst fears have come true. The Volturi know I exist. They know I know what you are. That means they'll be watching. Waiting. And if I stay human, I'm a liability, not just to myself, but to all of you. Edward clenched his teeth and growled, You exaggerate, Bella. We have been a curiosity for the Volturi for our lifestyle long before you came along. Carlyle leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. Bella, no one blames you for what happened. The Volturi's notice doesn't make you a liability, it makes you family under our protection. I don't want protection, she said quickly. Not like that. I want to belong. I want to stop being the weak link that keeps putting everyone in danger. Her eyes flicked toward Alice, then Rosalie, before finally settling on Carlyle again. Arrow made it clear what he expects. The Vulture won't accept a human who knows about your kind living unchecked. Either I become like you, or they'll come for me. And maybe for all of you. Rosalie's fingers tightened around her folded arms, the sound of her bracelets faint in the silence. You think that's a choice to make lightly, she said, her voice low and sharp. Bella didn't flinch. No. But it's mine to make. That earned her a flicker of surprise, even from Rosalie. Edward's voice was quiet, threaded with tension. Bella, we've talked about this. I know, she said, softer now but no less resolved. But this isn't just about us anymore. Carlyle exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. Then you're asking us to decide whether you should be changed. Bella shook her head. No. It is my decision, but I want to know where you stand. I want a vote, on whether you'll accept me as part of this family when the time comes. The room went silent as everyone pondered her words. Carlyle inclined his head, the motion deliberate and solemn. Then we'll honor that. A family vote, as we've always done. He looked around the table. We'll start with Alice. Alice didn't hesitate. I already consider Bella one of us, she said, her voice bright but steady. I've seen her as one of us, with us, for a long time now. She smiled gently at Bella. So my vote is yes. Carlyle nodded and turned to the next in line. Jasper. Jasper's eyes lifted from the table, the faintest crease between his brows. It's not an easy choice, he said slowly. But if she stays human, she's in constant danger, and so are we. The Vulture won't leave this alone. Better to turn that risk into strength. He gave a single, grave nod. Yes. Across from him, Rosalie shifted, arms crossed, jaw tight. When Carlyle met her gaze, she spoke before he could prompt her. No. The word was flat, but not cruel. Bella flinched slightly, but Rosalie went on. I'm not saying I don't want you here, Bella. I just don't want you to make this mistake. Her eyes softened, regret, not anger. If there was one thing I could undo, it would be losing my chance at a real human life. You still have yours, and potential you have not even considered yet. Don't throw it away because you think it's the only path forward. The silence that followed wasn't judgmental, just heavy, full of things no one could argue with. Carlyle inclined his head. Thank you, Rosalie. He turned to Emmett next. Emmett gave a half smile, that familiar mix of humor and sincerity. Hell, I say why not? She's tough. She went toe-to-toe with the Vulture and didn't blink. If anyone's earned a place in this family, it's her. He glanced at Bella with a grin. So yeah. That's a yes from me. Carlyle turned to Edythe next, his eyes prompting her vote. She had been quiet, her only movement the slow rhythm of her fingers rubbing mine as we held hands beneath the table. I could see the debate flicker across her face, tiny, precise changes that betrayed the storm behind her calm. Finally, she sighed. I'm sorry, Edward, she said softly. But you've already made it clear that if Bella were to die, you would not go on living. That alone leaves me no choice but to vote yes. I won't cast a vote that could someday be the reason you try to end your life again. Her voice didn't waver, but there was sorrow in it, the kind that only comes from having watched someone suffer once before. Carlyle looked next to Esme. Esme's expression was soft, almost maternal. I only ever wanted my children to be safe and loved, she said gently. You already love her, Edward, and she's proven she's willing to fight for you. I won't deny her the safety the change brings. She smiled faintly at Bella. Yes. Carlyle was last. He took a slow breath, his voice calm but solemn. It's not a choice to make lightly, and I don't take it as such. But the Vulture's attention is not something that fades. In time, their patience will end. He paused, looking between Bella and Edward. I trust you both to make the right decision when that time comes. My vote is yes. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward Edward, the unspoken question settling across the table. He looked stricken, the muscles in his jaw working, his hands tight around Bella's. You're also willing to take her soul away, he said quietly, bitterness threading through his tone. Bella didn't look away. You are my soul, Edward, she said simply. For a moment, no one spoke. Carlyle's voice broke the silence. Then it's decided. The family accepts Bella. If or when she chooses to join us fully, she will be welcome. The words hung there like a verdict and a promise, both. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the ripple of tension shift, not relief, but the fragile calm that comes after a storm when everyone's still waiting to see if it starts again. Carlyle then sat forward at the table, his hands folded loosely. Thomas, he said gently. Earlier, you mentioned something you learned in Nepal, about the clans, and perhaps about all of us. I think the time's right for you to tell it. Chapter 140, The Architect's Legacy. Carlyle sat forward at the table, his hands folded loosely. Thomas, he said gently. Earlier, you mentioned something you learned in Nepal about the clans, and perhaps about all of us. I think the time's right for you to tell it. Every eye in the room turned toward me. The quiet was expectant as I drew a breath and started to speak. It started with one of the books I brought back from Nepal, I said. It was written by Alarum Black, my grandmother. Carlyle's brows lifted slightly. Alarum Black, he repeated, as if tasting the name. I remember hearing rumors the last time we lived near the Quileute lands. Their chief had a sister or cousin who vanished. The elders were secretive, and we weren't exactly welcome guests. He offered a faint, rueful smile. We never learned more than whispers. She was the first woman to ever make the change, I said quietly. The elders didn't like that she had a power they couldn't control. So they exiled her. Esm's gentle voice broke the silence. That's cruel. She didn't let it stop her, I said. She found her own way. According to her journals, she met a sailor, a trader, who docked near Lapush. She imprinted on him and followed him home to Nepal. That's where she built her family. Edythe nodded, her voice soft but sure. I've been reading her work. The man was part of the Tiger clan, though he himself couldn't transform. Their children could. It seems your father was the first to ask for his gift to be bound, so he could travel freely. Carlyle leaned back, wonder flickering in his expression. So, she wasn't just an exile. She was the first of her kind. More than that, I said. Once she settled in Nepal, she started hearing stories, old stories. Tales that mirrored the myths she'd grown up with in the Pacific Northwest. Same symbols, same shapes, same warnings, just told in a different tongue. She realized they were fragments of the same story, carried across the world by time and memory. That's what drove her to start writing. Carlyle tilted his head. She was a historian. In a way, I said. But what she recorded wasn't history, it was origin. The story of how the first clans came to be. Where the shifter blood really began. Rosalie's voice was wary, but curious. And what did she find? I hesitated, feeling the weight of it again. That we weren't born from nature or magic. We were designed. The words seemed to settle into the room like a stone in still water. Carlyle's eyes narrowed slightly. Designed by whom? Not who, I said. What? Ilaram called them the architects, beings who came from the sky long before recorded history. They found early humanity and began to change it. Jasper's tone carried quiet disbelief. You're saying aliens? Call them what you want, I said. But the stories are the same across every culture. The symbols match, the language echoes. In Nepal, they were called the Sky Builders. In Egypt the Watchers. In Sumeria, the Anunnaki. Different names, same figures, not human, but something else. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Edward's frown was more thoughtful than dismissive. Edythe leaned forward slightly. You said they changed humanity. For what purpose? That's where the stories agree, I said. They were preparing for war. A war that wasn't ours. The architects needed soldiers, beings who could fight, heal, and lead. Each clan was made for a purpose. Some controlled the elements. Some could mend wounds. Others were built purely for strength or speed. Humanity was meant to be their army. Rosalie's voice came quietly, almost reluctant. And vampires, were we meant to be the leaders? I exhaled, not wanting to say it but knowing I had to. Mistakes. The change didn't always hold. Sometimes the energy, the life force collapsed. It left the body alive, but empty. Needing others' vitality to stay alive. The architects called them the Hollow Ones. Carlyle looked down at his hands. His expression was thoughtful, but there was pain in it too. So we were never a design. Just an accident that endured. I don't think they meant for you to die out either, I said. They just didn't care enough to fix it. For a long moment, only the hum of the house filled the silence. Eventually, I went on, the architects left. Maybe they won their war. Maybe they lost. No one knows. But when they were gone, they didn't take us with them. The clans were left behind, strong, fast, powerful, with no one to serve. For a while, they worked to protect the rest of humanity. They built cities. They taught. They ruled kindly. Edythe's voice was quiet. But power rarely stays kind. I nodded. No. The clans began to believe their gifts made them divine. Humans worshipped them. Built monuments. Offered sacrifices. And eventually, they believed their own lies. Jasper's tone was dark. And turned on each other. Exactly. They fought for dominion, each claiming to be the true gods. Civilizations burned in the crossfire. Humanity called it judgment. Really, it was just pride. Carlyle's voice was low, almost reverent. So, the gods of myth weren't gods at all, just corrupted clans. Yeah, I said. Olympus. Egypt. Sumeria. All fragments of the same fall. Until the wardens came. Rosalie frowned. The what? The old texts say they came from the stars as well, I said. Maybe even from the same origin as the architects, but with a different purpose. Some of the oldest records call them the second light, the ones who followed the trail of destruction their brothers left behind. Others call them the silent judges. No one agrees on what they truly were, only that they arrived when the world had nearly torn itself apart. The room had gone utterly still. Even Bella's breathing had slowed. They came not as conquerors, but as witnesses, I continued. They walked among the ruins the clans had made, cities of glass turned to sand, rivers boiled by wars fought with things no human language could name. They saw humans crawling out from under the ashes, afraid of the very beings that had once promised to protect them. Esm whispered, they pitied us. Maybe, I said. But pity wasn't their purpose. They were peacekeepers. Guardians of balance. They saw what the architect's gifts had done and decided it couldn't continue. But they didn't come to destroy, just to end the cycle. They judged us. Jasper's tone was low. Judged how? They took back what had been given, I said. They stripped the clans of their dominion, pulled a majority of the power out of the hands of those who abused it, and bound it to the earth itself. The texts say they used resonance, the same frequency that created the change in the first place. They locked that resonance inside a single point on the planet, a living seal, forged in stone and crystal. The clans called it Shorkai. Rosalie's voice softened despite herself. The Mountain of Balance. I nodded. The wardens carved their mark deep into its heart, a sigil said to hum with the same energy that once ran through our blood. And from that day on, every clan was tethered to it. Step too far from the mountain for too long, and your fire fades. Your strength goes quiet. It was mercy, in its way, and punishment. Carlyle's voice carried awe. The Himalayas. Yeah, I said softly. The mountain isn't sacred because of worship, it's sacred because it holds the weight of 1,000 fallen gods. The wardens didn't just take our power, they gave it boundaries. They believed that balance had to be enforced, or the world would never survive us again. Edythe's eyes reflected the pale light from the window. So, they didn't kill the clans, they caged them. Exactly, I said. And they left. No one knows where they went, or if they still watch. But the legends say the wardens left one final warning, carved into the base of the mountain. Carlyle looked up sharply. A warning. I nodded. Power without balance will always call the wardens. The words lingered in the air, quiet and heavy. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Jasper was the one to break the silence. What about the Quileute? The shifters here? As far as I can tell, I said, they were never part of it. Their gift came from something else, spirit, not science. That's why they're still free. Rosalie crossed her arms, her tone sharp. And us? Why were vampires left untouched? Because the wardens didn't see you as a threat, I said. You couldn't build armies, couldn't reproduce, couldn't spread. You were, contained. The vampires of that time didn't have enough control to stop once they bit someone, so it wasn't known that their saliva could infect others with vampirism. Carlyle's voice was soft. So, we were spared out of ignorance. Or mercy, I offered. Maybe they saw potential in you that the clans had lost. Edythe spoke last, her voice a whisper. And the clans that remain? They rebuilt, I said. Smaller, humbler. Over centuries, they forgot what they were and started calling their gifts divine instead of alien. The myths faded, twisted into stories of gods and monsters. Maybe that was the warden's plan all along, to let time bury the truth until no one remembered what we were made for. The room fell silent again, the weight of ancient memory pressing in from every side. Chapter 141, A Life Chosen. Carlyle leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin as he studied me. The reflective calm in his eyes wasn't just curiosity now, it was understanding. And yet, he said slowly, you are here. A being of both worlds. I frowned slightly. Both. He nodded. Part of the bound clans through your grandfather's line, and part of the free ones through your grandmother's. Spirit and fire. The science of the architects tempered by the spirit of the Quileute. That balance is what makes you and possibly your uncle different. Edythe's gaze flicked toward me, soft but intent. That's why your shifting powers woke away from the mountain in Nepal and earlier than they are used to, she said. Also, why the binding doesn't touch you. I hadn't considered that. The clans are so sure that their only options are to die or give their fire to the mountain, and maybe that's what happened to my uncle. He voluntarily gave his fire to the mountain while I refused to let it go at all, so I have no tether even after the ritual. Carlyle asked, what made you decide to go against the clan's rule of giving your fire to the mountain? Was it some deep instinct? I squeezed Edythe's hand. When I was faced with the decision, I also faced a trial. That trial made me remember that Edythe loved me before I went to Nepal, so she loved the fire in me as well. To me, that meant that if I gave up a part of myself to anyone or anything else, I wouldn't be the person she loved anymore. So, I took the fire back into me. Esme gave a little squeal. That's just so romantic. Edythe gave me a smile that made me feel like the sun was rising. The ideas it gave me would have to be thought through at a later date. Emmett rolled his eyes at the romantic air around me and Edythe. Does any of this really mean anything though? I mean, I get that it's good to know a bit about where we came from, but it doesn't change anything for us right now, does it? Carlyle smiled faintly. Knowledge doesn't always change the present, Emmett. But it gives shape to what we are, and what we might still become. Jasper nodded slightly. It matters, he said quietly. Knowing we weren't created for destruction, that's something. Rosalie gave a small shrug but didn't argue. Fine. But unless one of these wardens plans to drop in and pass judgment again, I say we let sleeping gods stay buried. Edythe's hand tightened around mine beneath the table. Maybe, she said softly, but the truth still matters. Especially if it tells us how far we've come. Carlyle leaned back, thoughtful. Indeed. And perhaps it tells us why you, Thomas, are able to exist between worlds. You've carried the fire without corruption, without bond, a reminder that what began in manipulation can still evolve into choice. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling in. Maybe that's the point of all of this. The architects made weapons, but we decide what to do with what they left behind. Silence followed, softer this time, as if everyone was still working through their own reflection of what that meant. Bella's voice broke the quiet, hesitant at first, then steady. So, that's what I want too. A choice. Every head turned toward her. She met Carlyle's eyes first, then Edward's, her expression calm but resolved. None of you chose this life. Carlyle didn't. Esme didn't. Rosalie, Emmett, Jasper, Alice, it was forced on all of you to save your lives. But I'm not asking for rescue. Her voice strengthened, gathering conviction with every word. I'm asking because I want this. Because I understand what it means, and I'm still choosing it. Carlyle's expression softened, compassion flickering behind his eyes. Bella, that kind of awareness makes your request extraordinary. You would be the first of us to seek this life willingly. Edward's posture went rigid beside her. Bella. But she didn't stop. You all voted. You said I was part of this family now, and I want to be part of it. I don't want to wait anymore. The air in the room seemed to thicken again. Carlyle's tone was careful, patient. You mean the change? Bella nodded, her hand tightening around Edward's. Yes. Tonight. Edward froze, his voice a low growl. Bella. She met his gaze without wavering. I know what I'm asking, Edward. But Arrow won't wait forever, and I'm done pretending that being human protects anyone. Carlyle glanced between them both, the faintest sadness in his voice. You would choose what was forced upon all of us. That alone changes everything. I sighed, already seeing the tension tighten in Edward's jaw. I wasn't going to make my sister happy with what I was about to say, but someone had to. Bella, I said carefully, there's something you're not thinking about, your life here and now. Her head turned toward me, eyes steady. In about 5 hours, Charlie's going to wake up and realize you're gone. His first stop will be here. And even if he doesn't find you, he's not going to stop looking. I kept my tone level, firm but not harsh. You disappearing like that isn't going to convince anyone that you're safe. And if the Vulturi are really watching like we all think they are, that kind of chaos will just draw more attention. Bella frowned, her resolve faltering slightly. So what? I'm supposed to just go home like nothing happened. Yes, I said simply. For now. You need time to finish this part of your life before you start the next. To close the door properly before you walk through another one. Edward glanced at me, surprised, maybe even grateful, before turning back to Bella. He's right, he said quietly. If you leave now, you'll destroy Charlie. He'll never stop searching. He deserves a goodbye, even if he doesn't understand it. Bella's eyes dropped to the table, her knuckles white around Edward's hand. I hate waiting, she said under her breath. Edythe reached across the table, her tone softer than mine. Then make the waiting count, she said. End this life the way you want to remember it, not like something stolen, but something you finished. Carlyle nodded once, approving. Edythe's right. Closure matters, Bella. We've all lost enough to know that leaving things undone follows you, even into forever. Bella swallowed hard, her voice smaller now. I don't want forever without him. Edward's voice cracked faintly, the anger drained out of it. I will always be here, he promised. But give yourself time to do this right. I caught the flicker of guilt in his expression, the subtle hesitation that said he was still hoping right might mean never. But Bella didn't see it, or maybe she chose not to. After a long silence, she nodded once. Fine. But I'm holding you to it. Edward exhaled shakily, managing the ghost of a smile. I wouldn't expect anything less. The moment lingered, fragile, uneasy, but for now, enough. Carlyle finally rose from his seat. Then we're agreed. Bella stays human, for now. But when the time comes, we'll honor her choice. The family nodded, one by one, the decision settling like a stone dropped in still water. Edythe leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. That was well handled. I gave a faint shrug. Yeah, but it's only borrowed peace. She smiled knowingly. All peace is borrowed. And for a brief, fleeting moment, I believed her. The meeting broke apart slowly. Conversations quieted to murmurs, the scrape of chairs, the whisper of feet across polished floors. Edward stood first, his movements careful, like he was afraid even sound might break Bella's fragile calm. Come on, he said softly. I'll take you home. Bella looked exhausted, not in the physical sense, but in the way people look when they've held too much inside for too long. She nodded, letting him guide her toward the door. Esme brushed her fingers against Bella's arm as they passed. You did well tonight, dear, she said gently. Thanks, Bella murmured, though her eyes stayed fixed on Edward. The door closed quietly behind them, and for a moment, the silence that followed was heavier than before. Carlyle turned toward the rest of us, his expression weary but thoughtful. It's late, he said. Take some time to let tonight sink in. Tomorrow, we start living like a family again. One by one, the Cullens drifted away, Jasper and Alice first, whispering softly, Rosalie and Emmett heading upstairs, his hand steady at her back, Esme lingering long enough to straighten all the chairs before following Carlyle toward his study. That left Edythe and me alone by the door. She glanced up at me, eyes warm but weary in their own quiet way. Home? She asked softly. Yeah, I said. Home. The run through the forest was nearly silent. The night was still, the clouds breaking just enough for the stars to slip through. Every so often, she would look over at me, not speaking, just there. The kind of presence that didn't need to fill the air with words. When we reached our house, she didn't wait for me to unlock the door. She moved ahead, smooth and silent, flicking on the lights like she'd done it 100 times before. Inside, everything was just as we'd left it earlier, quiet, lived in, real. Edythe turned, leaning against the back of the couch. You were right tonight, she said. About Bella needing to finish this part of her life first. She's not ready, I said simply. She thinks she is, but she still sees forever like a fairy tale. Edythe's lips curved faintly. Maybe. But she'll learn. They always do. I studied her, the faint gold in her eyes, the way the lamplight caught her copper hair. I'd seen her fierce, quiet, furious, protective. But moments like this, calm, steady, endlessly certain, hit deeper than anything else ever could. I've been thinking, I said after a long pause. That sounds dangerous, she teased, but her smile softened. About what? About us. Her eyebrows rose slightly, and she tilted her head. Go on. I spent 6 months in Nepal trying to understand what I am, I said slowly. But tonight, talking about choice, hearing Bella say she wanted this life even knowing what it costs, it made me realize something. Edythe stepped closer, curiosity flickering in her eyes. And what's that? That I've already made my choice, I said. Not about the fire, or the clans, or any of that. About you. She stilled, not frozen, but focused entirely on me. I want a life with you, Edythe. Whatever that looks like. However long it lasts. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. You're talking about marriage. Yeah, I said, my throat tight but steady. Eventually. I mean, not tonight. But soon. When things calm down. A slow, radiant smile spread across her face, the kind that could make eternity sound like a heartbeat. You realize, she said softly, that's a very human way to propose. I smiled back. Guess I'm still working on the immortal timing. She brushed her fingers along my jaw, cool against the warmth of my skin. Then take your time, tiger. You already know my answer. I covered her hand with mine, holding it there a moment longer. Outside, the night had gone still, no storm, no threat, no watchful eyes. For the first time in months, the quiet wasn't the kind that came before something. It was the kind that came after. And as I looked at her, I realized that for the first time since this all began, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was home. Chapter 142, A Question of Forever. Thomas POV. It had been a few days since we'd come home from Italy, long enough for the rhythm of forks to remember itself. The forest was quiet again. The rain had returned to its usual whisper through the pines, the kind of steady grey that felt like the earth exhaling. The Cullens had already fallen back into routine, school, pretending at normalcy, keeping their world balanced on the razor edge between what was real and what had to stay hidden. I wasn't quite back in that rhythm yet. Carlisle was still sorting out my correspondence credits from Nepal, and the principal wouldn't let me set foot in class until they came through. Something I was happy to put to Edythe as I dropped her off at the school entrance. Edythe decided against having her car shipped back to Forks from New York. She said she wanted to play up her role as the passenger princess for the first time ever. Naturally, I wasn't complaining. Our kiss goodbye was interrupted by a mean-tempered gremlin that answered to the name Alice. Her voice cut through our moment like the world's most cheerful alarm clock. "All right, lovebirds," she said, tapping on the door of the truck with one perfectly manicured finger. "Some of us actually have to pretend to be high school students today," and the bell rings and she checked an invisible watch. 2 minutes. "Move it or lose it." Edythe pulled back, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "You know, for someone who claims to see the future, your timing is suspiciously bad." Alice grinned. "No, it's perfect. You were 1 second away from getting us all a reputation." I rolled my eyes. "Pretty sure that ship sailed a long time ago, Pixie." She leaned on the open window. Keep calling me names, Mountain Man. Just remember, I'm learning to see around your ability to block my sight." Edythe laughed, soft but melodic. "You're just mad about that block of time you can't see." Alice put on a mock-serious expression on her face. "Hey, that nearly 2 weeks I can't see. Something to do with you two during late April and early May. If I couldn't see everyone from the Volturi still in Volterra at that time I would be very worried." I just smiled at her. "Think of it as time to relish how us non-seeing the future people see the world, Alice." Alice gave an exaggerated sigh and straightened, hands on her hips. "You two are insufferable," she declared, though the grin tugging at her lips ruined the act. "Fine, keep your little mystery. Just don't come crying to me when whatever you're planning blows up in your faces." Edythe's smile was serene, unreadable. "Don't worry too much, Alice. If your block is what I think it is, you will be plenty busy. Alice pouted, I am telling Jasper you two are picking on me. That reminded me, hey Alice, I am stealing Jasper tonight for a guy thing. No asking him what it's about. She waved over her shoulder, yet. He just disappeared from my sight, so he must be okay with your plan. And I see me and Edythe riding home with Edward after dropping the grounded girl off at home. Stay out of trouble, or at least try to. Edythe lingered a heartbeat longer, her eyes catching the morning light in a way that made it hard to think straight. You know, she murmured, you provoke her on purpose. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, all innocence. Her lips curved, that quiet, knowing smile that always gave me away. Liar. She leaned in one last time, her breath cool against my skin. Try not to do anything reckless while I'm gone. No promises, I said softly. She smirked, closing the door. Didn't think so. The truck suddenly felt too empty when she was gone, her scent still lingering faintly in the air, pine and cold wind and the ever-present sweet smell of sugar. I sat for a long moment, watching the last of the students filter into the building. The clouds hung low and silver, promising rain that hadn't yet fallen. Forks looked exactly as it always did, small, damp, and half asleep, but after everything that had happened, it somehow felt steadier. Still, there was one loose end left hanging. I started the truck and turned onto the road that led back into town. It was time to see Uncle Charlie. Charlie's house looked exactly the same, cruiser in the drive, porch light a little crooked, the kind of place that doesn't pretend to be more than it is. I parked behind the cruiser and knocked. The door swung open before I finished raising my hand. Thomas, Charlie said, giving me a once-over. You really are back. Morning, Uncle Charlie. He stepped aside. Get in here before you soak through. Coffee's on. The kitchen hadn't changed, battered table, chipped mugs, the smell of overbrewed coffee that probably kept this town running. He set a mug in front of me and sat. For a moment he just looked at me, not quite stern, not quite smiling. Listen, he said, clearing his throat, I never thanked you for those calls. From Nepal. When things were rough. He didn't say Edward's name. He didn't have to. You were busy doing your thing, but you checked in anyway. Made sure she ate. Talked her through some pretty lousy nights. I nodded. It wasn't much. It was enough. He took a sip. You care about her. I never doubted that. You know more than most what she did for me. She basically put me back together again, so there is nothing I won't do for her. He grunted in approval at my words, so you got back just in time for my blood pressure to spike again. She takes off for days with no word to me, and the next time I see her she looks like a zombie in his arms. She is going to give me a heart attack. I just sighed at Charlie's frustration. At least she came back safe, and that's what truly matters to you. I know it. Yet. Safe and grounded until she's 30. He didn't miss a beat. And that boy's on thin ice with me. Real thin. I figured. He paused to take a sip from his cup. So how was Nepal? You get the answers you were looking for. It was okay, not sure I will ever go back though. I think I'm on a different path than they are. But the real reason I came to talk to you, was to get some advice. How did you know Renee was the one you wanted to spend your life with? Charlie